Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Peter walked out of the restaurant with his coats open. It was freezing mid-February after all, but the man didn't feel cold at all, and he wanted to be in his car as soon as possible. It was warm, quiet, empty, without these people and their looks, curious, sympathetic, interested. Peter was not in the right state to communicate with them. They don't expect any words or actions from him. They watch his reactions carefully. Peter opened the door of a brand new glossy foreign car, lowered himself into the driver's seat. The man had just recently taken the car from the showroom and was as happy as a child. Alice had joked even then about someone who hadn't played with a toy car as a child. She smiled, and Peter imagined how in the spring they would go to the Capitol in this very car to walk around Red Square, have dinner in a restaurant located near Madison Square Garden, just wander the streets of New York and talk about this and that as they used to. Peter was still sure then that his wife would recover. He didn't even doubt it. What could be serious in a young woman leading a healthy lifestyle? Just a temporary ailment. How wealthy and naive was he then? At the thought of his wife, Peter's heart clenched painfully. In his head did not fit that she is no longer there. Lisa's life was cut short. Now he was returning from her funeral. It was the most terrible day of his life. The man realized that some episodes of the event would haunt him for the rest of his days. Dreams would keep him awake at night. In front of his eyes stood Alice, fortunately not as she was today. Cold, still frozen expression, happy, lively, cheerful, smiling. Peter tried to imagine his wife exactly like that, to keep in his memory his favorite image in the most minute details. And yet, to his surprise, the man realized it was impossible. Some things were already forgotten. For example, he could hardly remember her voice. After all, only a short time had passed. Until 3 days ago, Alice was alive. She was sick. Peter knew it was serious even then. He had no idea it would end up like this. The doctors had discovered that Alice had a very rare form of blood cancer. The treatment didn't work, but there was still hope. It seemed necessary to find other doctors. Get Alice into a better clinic, and everything would be fine. Peter was constantly in touch with specialists from all over the country, and even foreign medical luminaries. Alice was treated, examined, given expensive drugs, chemo sessions, and the results were short-lived. At the hospital, her vitals seemed to start improving. Alice would be discharged, but at home, it would happen again. Weakness, worsening pain tests. In recent months, Alice had become a pale shadow of herself. She had always been slender, but the disease had taken its toll on the young woman. Alice resembled a living skeleton of bones, tight earth of raw skin color and bruises under huge blue eyes. An unnatural poverty. Alice's lush ace hair had rotted and thinned. She didn't even have the energy now to get to the bathroom or make herself breakfast. Nor if, frankly, did she want to at all. But Alice had to eat, as the doctors said, even if she didn't want to. Peter worked hard. He couldn't leave his business. He couldn't quit his job. Of course, he wanted to spend more time with his wife. She needed so much help. But the treatment required a lot of money, so the man did his best. Good, at least near Alice in his absence, were her mother Helen and childhood friend Emily. Emily was never far from Alice's side. Helen was sick herself. She'd always had a weak heart, and the situation with her daughter worsened her condition many times over. Several times an ambulance took the elderly woman right out of Peter and Alice's apartment. But Emily turned out to be a real rescue. The woman worked remotely, filling out product cards for the market playoffs. It wasn't much of an income, but Emily was happy about it. She graduated from culinary school and specialty worked, did not want to carry heavy pots all day to spend in the kitchen riding heat. Oh no. Emily found herself a completely different way to earn money. Such a free schedule came in handy for Emily. A friend could look after Alice without any problems. She would come to Peter and Alice's apartment with her laptop in the morning. She would only leave in the evening when the landlord returned. Emily would entertain Alice with conversation. She also cooked for her special meals recommended by specialists. She offered her pills in time, fed her by the hour, did not let her friend fall into despondency. Constantly slowing down, lived, remembered some funny incidents from their common childhood. Peter was very grateful to Emily. She had done a lot for Alice, and for him too. Emily had supported him during the days of Alice's serious illness. And afterwards, when everything had happened. There were a lot of people at the funeral. But of course, Alice was so young, so active, so social. Peter couldn't even mentally add words to all those definitions. He still didn't believe it. Alice's coworkers and Peter's relatives, friends and girlfriends, were a whole bunch of people. The man was even confused to see such a gathering of people at the gates of the church where his beloved was to be buried. Of course, they all mourned, cried, expressed sympathy. But life always takes its own course. Peter, despite the fact that he was in some incredible state to notice details, people talked among themselves on distracted topics and even smiled sometimes. Yes, the loss of Faith was a tragedy for each of them. They knew her and maybe even loved her. But the feelings of those who came, they were nothing compared to what he was experiencing. They couldn't understand the depth of his despair, couldn't feel his pain. And that irritated him. Peter restrained himself from saying anything rude to anyone. Helen, Alice's mother, was barely holding on with only Helen and Emily. Only these two people were grieving, just like Peter. They too had lost someone important. Helen's own daughter and friend, practically a sister. She and Alice grew up together. They had so much in common, and yet Emily found the strength to support both Peter and Helen. Alice's mother was painful to look at in general. I would like to hug her, to tell the old woman the right words. Except he couldn't physically do it too hard. Too scary, too painful. Then it's all later. The funeral at the cemetery, then the wake at the restaurant. The feast was still in full swing when Peter suddenly realized that he couldn't stay here any longer. He didn't want to go home either. Everything that reminded him of Alice. How to enter the apartment, knowing that the beloved spouse will never be here again. And yet to stay among all these people who were no longer shy, talking animatedly, looking at each other, smiling. It happened as if involuntarily by itself. The guests tried to keep a sad expression, befitting the occasion, but life was taking its toll. Anyway, Peter got up from his chair and without saying goodbye to anyone, moved towards the exit. Emily noticed it and hurried after him. "Where are you going?" The woman held Peter by the arm. He had already left the hall into the lobby. "I can't be here anymore," the man answered honestly. "Home." Peter nodded briefly. "Do you want me to come with you?" Emily stared intently into Peter's eyes. With one hand, the woman held him by the elbow. With the other, she stroked his back soothingly. Worried. So much involvement in her, so caring, good Emily. A loyal friend. After all, once Emily did not like Peter. He even argued about it with Alice, who assured that her friend was the most faithful and reliable person in the world. Well, that's how it turned out in the end. Alice was right. Life proved it. "How can I go with you?" Emily repeated the question. "No, you shouldn't. I want to be alone, whatever you say. But if anything, call me right away, any time of day or night. If you want to talk, if you need anything, it's hard for me too. Grief is easier to get through, I guess." Emily lowered her eyes. She seemed to be fighting back tears at that very moment. "You should stay with Helen. She doesn't look so good." "I can't do it myself." Emily nodded briefly. Yes, Helen had had a very hard time. Was it a joke to lose your only daughter, young, beautiful, funny? The woman had put her whole life into Alice, stretched herself to give her daughter at least the bare essentials. It was hard, but she did it. And here's the bottom line. Helen was literally supported by some relative of hers, either a cousin or a grandniece. Peter didn't know the connection. A woman a little younger than Helen looked was always with her, then a pill, then a vial or something to her nose. She was keeping an eye on the poor mother's condition. It's good that we found such a person. Peter won't abandon Helen. He'll always be there for her. And they would talk some more, but that would be later. Now the man had neither moral nor physical strength for that. He sat in the car and stared without seeing at the street. Snow and frost were not his or Alice's favorite time of year. Winter was already tiring of spring waiting for a long time to come. Peter was in no hurry to get home. He realized that there are a lot of Alice's things, and how to look at them now, if even without these things in his head only she. Alice and Peter met about 5 years ago. It was at a sports club where Alice worked as a fitness trainer. Actually, the girl led group classes. There were women going to her. She supervised them. There were other trainers in the gym, but there weren't enough for everyone. Therefore, Alice, seeing how wrongly the novelty of using fitness equipment, consulted him, although she was not supposed to do so. Alice took an instant liking to Peter. You bet she did. Tall, slender, trim, huge blue eyes beautiful. Shimmering in the light, blonde hair a beauty. That's just it. There were many pretty girls in the trainers, the eye pleased, but Alice stood out for her naturalness and friendliness. She was warm, open, smiling. It was immediately apparent that the girl loved what she did. This quality could not but arouse Peter's respect. He himself was exactly the same. As Peter and Alice gradually became closer, their relationship became friendly. They joked with each other, shared the news of the day, got to know each other, getting closer and closer. Peter was afraid to make the first move. That's at work. He was determined and confident. Took on difficult projects, handled the toughest tasks, even took risks. But talking to Alice, asking her out on a date or even to the movies, that was scary. Because, well, what if they refuse? And then how to communicate then? There would be awkwardness between them. Alice will start avoiding him. There's no telling how it would have ended if Alice hadn't taken the initiative. I hear the Steel Eagles are coming here. She approached Peter one day. Maybe we should go because my friend Emily doesn't listen to that kind of stuff. Peter was kind of taken aback for a second. He and Alice often talked about their musical preferences. They both liked rock. They both listened to the Steel Eagles, among other things. Peter had seen posters posted around the city, but for some reason it hadn't occurred to him to take the opportunity to invite a girl to a concert. And Alice, from her lips, the proposal to visit this event together sounded so easy, so natural and relaxed. Of course, Peter had agreed. He doubted whether to offer Alice to pay for her ticket or not. Maybe the girl would take it the wrong way. Alice came to the rescue. It turned out that she had an aunt working in the ticket office, and she got 2 free tickets for her niece. So the matter resolved itself. Peter was with Alice outside the gym for the first time. They walked side by side from time to time, casually touching each other with their hands or shoulders, discussing the rock band, the newcomers to the gym, and even Peter's work. Yes, Alice seemed genuinely interested in what Peter was doing. You're so smart, figuring out all those percentages and graphs. I wish I had a head like that. Peter knew by then that Alice was trying to go to university right after school, and also to study economics, just like him. Only she didn't have enough points to pass the minimum threshold. And the competition that year for the prestigious department was very high. But the girl was not upset. Economics did not attract her too much. Yes, and math, logic, and similar disciplines she did not particularly like. Rather, enrollment in economics was the desire of Alice Hullen's mother. She believed that the economist profession is monetary and respected. That's why in high school, despite the meager salary, hired tutors for her daughter. Only those still did not cope with their task, the girl never entered the desired faculty. But her other dream came true. Alice from childhood had a passion for sports. She from the first grade attended a sports school gymnastics department, went to competitions, received discharges stars from the sky was not enough, but certain successes still achieved. Alice very inspiringly told Peter about her feelings. You know, it is such an inexpressible feeling when you feel your whole body, every cell. When I missed a few training sessions in a row, I immediately felt this lightness, agility disappear. Now it's the same, I just relax and that's it. They say movement is life for a reason. Alice wanted to make other people happy and healthy. Let them also feel this muscular joy. Let them become more beautiful and energetic. Alice didn't want to be a trainer at a children's school. She felt that she was not too good for working with young children who might be future champions. But the work at the fitness club is up to her. The trainer contributed to the enrollment of one of her favorite students in a pedagogical university. Alice studied there with pleasure, got her diploma, and got a job in a sports club. She shared her impressions with Peter. First of all, I like the movement. I can't do without it. Secondly, it's nice to see how people gradually transform, lose weight, become more confident. But thirdly, I am always in good shape myself. Peter smiled. Yes, Alice was in good shape. They fit well, even the simple things from the cheap stores. It was impossible not to admire her slim figure. That first night after the concert, Peter finally decided to tell the girl about his feelings. The moment was just right. They were walking through a deserted autumn park, tall bright lanterns and trees decorated with golden foliage. And no one around. You know, I really like you, Peter said decisively, looking into the huge blue eyes of his charming companion. Understand me correctly, and I you. But at last Alice smiled. I thought I'd never make up my mind. I know I can see it all. Why are you so tense? I really like you too, don't I? Peter couldn't believe his ears at the time. Just like that, it turns out to be simple and easy. And what? Only so much time. And they started seeing each other. Walking around the city, sitting in cozy cafes, trips to the countryside. Gradually, Peter and Alice got to know each other's friends. That's how Peter got to know Emily, the best friend of his favorite girl. For some reason, he didn't like Emily right away. She was a pretty red-haired girl. Short, nice round green eyes, quite attractive. A big smile, a ringing laugh. Seemed like a wonderful girl. And yet, Alice and Emily grew up together. They lived in neighboring entrances, played in the same sandbox, and became first graders, even sat at the same desk. Always and everywhere together. Emily was also involved in gymnastics at first. The girls went to the gym together, but Emily was not very good at it. She couldn't even get the second junior category, so she just sat on the third. And then she quit, of course. But Alice stayed. Emily, like Alice, could not boast of success in studies. The girls were weak and good for 24 hours, and then they slipped to threes. True, thanks to the efforts of tutors, Alice still managed to get a good certificate. To enter the university, it did not help her. Nevertheless, Emily graduated from the culinary college. The girl, as she expressed herself, was not going to work hard and therefore found a not burdensome occupation. Filling out product cards at Marketplace, they earned pennies, but for life in general was enough. Despite the initial data, Emily was quite an ambitious girl. She planned to open her own business in the future. However, she did not take any steps in this direction, explaining it by the congestion at work and other life circumstances. There was something unnatural about India. But Peter did not share these impressions and observations with Alice. He saw how close the girls were. They often talked about some episodes from their childhood and youth, showing their connection in every possible way. Peter did not want to upset his beloved. Alice was worried about Emily. She was having trouble with guys for some reason. She even asked Peter to introduce her to someone, a friend or a colleague. Peter tried. He had a young unmarried programmer at work, a nice guy, only very shy, inexperienced. He wasn't very good with girls, just like Peter used to be. It didn't work out. The programmers went on one date, and that was it. The guy then evasively explained to Peter that they didn't fit each other's personality. And a little later, the friend admitted that Emily took him too quickly, made a capricious princess of herself on the first date, and demanded some kind of investment. Hinted at a trip to an expensive store. All in all, the guy suddenly felt like he was being used. An unpleasant feeling of a second date he didn't want. Peter also didn't like Emily's jokes about Alice. It seemed like friendly banter, but it was a little too precious about her friend's accomplishments and her dignity. At least, that's what it seemed to Peter. And yet Emily turned out to be a great friend. She was always there for Alice. When she needed help, she supported her in difficult situations, found the right words to cheer her up. The girls seemed to understand each other with half an eye. but they should, considering the length of their friendship. It was Emily who had been by Alice's side when she was fading away. Even on the very last day, when Alice was already very ill, Emily had managed to bring a faint smile to her friend's face. Peter couldn't do it, no matter how hard he tried. Emily, on the other hand, was doing fine. On those hard days, Peter even felt guilty. He had never treated Emily well. She turned out to be such a loyal friend. Emily had helped him with the funeral, too. Peter was in a state of prostration. He didn't know who to call, what to do. Emily took care of everything. All he had to do was get the money. Who to transfer it to? The man shook his head and pushed away the unpleasant memories. He was still sitting in the car. It was already getting dark. People were leaving the restaurant in small groups. They were all the people who had come to say goodbye to Alice tonight. Peter saw a cab pull up. Helen and her relative got in, the one who had been helping her all this day, cheering her on. Emily walked them both to the car and then headed off to some acquaintances she and Alice had in common. Apparently, they were supposed to give her a ride home. Emily didn't notice. The man was glad of that. She would have wanted to talk to him, to comfort him. And Peter wanted to be alone. The man chased the scenes of helplessness out of his mind. Alice's ears on the bed in the bedroom. The features of the face shot up. The lips turned pale. Even then, one could realize that there was no escape. But Peter paid no attention to all these signs. He was full of plans and hopes. The man arranged for Alice to be transported to a Moscow clinic. Everyone had already given up on her, but one professor still decided to try an experimental treatment. He didn't give any guarantees, but it was still a chance, and Emily had her doubts. She tried to tell Peter that Alice shouldn't be tortured. She needed peace. How could she travel to the capital in such a serious condition? Her opinion decided nothing. But still Peter was not pleased that the girl was so zealous to dissuade him. Only he held himself in check. Emily had done so much for Lesia, for both of them. When the symptoms of the disease began to appear, it must have been a little over a year ago. Only at first, not Peter, not even Alice noticed the warning signs. Well, Alice started to get tired faster. If earlier after training she came home, cheerful, full of energy, now she barely had enough strength to take a shower. Then she'd fall on the couch, turn on the TV and watch shows. "It's not like you," Peter jokingly remarked. He'd come home from work later. "What can you do?" "Age?" Alice smiled. It was only the beginning. Ahead of the girl awaited much harder trials, but at that time neither of the spouses even knew about it. Alice and Peter were planning children. Both dreamed of a large family. Peter even already looked for a house in the countryside. His apartment, of course, was very spacious and beautiful, but when they had children, they would need more space. And of course, a big garden with swings with merry-go-rounds for merry games. Alice loved talking about what kind of family they would have. The couple made grand plans. What would their children do? Where would they take them on trips? What kind of birthdays would they throw them? These were pleasant conversations. They made me feel warm and calm. But both Peter and Alice agreed that there was no need to hurry with the hares. The thing was that Peter often went on business trips. He had such a position, but soon he was to be promoted, and then these trips would stop. Only for this man needed to put himself to the full, to show himself at his best, and that took a lot of time and effort. Income and prospects, and even higher-paying jobs Peter tried. He was often absent from home and business trips. Well, what child can be in such a situation? Yes, and Alice was actively working. A fitness trainer is a personal brand. You have to work hard to build it. Contracts with different fitness clubs in the city, incessant training to improve skills. Alice has not yet had time for motherhood. Both spouses led active lives, worked hard for a bright future together, and they were young, still very young. The biological clock was still ticking. They were not driven by anything. "When will you please us, your parents, with grandchildren?" Alice's mother often asked the young ones this question. "We'll make our daughter happy," she promised, "but it's not the time now. We're both pursuing careers." "So you are. A child won't hurt. I'll always help you if you need it." "Mom, you have a weak heart. My conscience won't allow me to put an active baby on you." Later, Peter often remembered these conversations and desperately regretted that they did not listen to Helen's advice. The man felt tears coming to his eyes again. He still hadn't started the engine. It was getting dark. A snowstorm was beginning. Peter thought of the children he and Alice had never had time to bring into the world. On the one hand, if they still had a child, the man would feel less lonely in his life. There would be a meaning to live for, something to do to try. On the other hand, a little boy or girl would have lost his mother, the most dear and important person. Even thinking about it made me afraid. Peter pulled his phone out of his pocket, absent-mindedly flipping through the gallery. There were a lot of photos. Pictures from holidays, photos of documents, just random shots. The man was only interested in pictures of his wife. A year ago, the disease had already made itself known, but Alice still looked as normal as ever. She was trying to live her life as usual. True, such an active pace is no longer clearly could not withstand. First, the girl gave up a few part-time jobs, then dropped out of the courses she dreamed of finishing. Alice lost weight. She was now often nauseous. Peter at first even wrote it off as a sign of pregnancy. Yes, they planned to have heirs later, but they would have been happy with this scenario. The husband persuaded his beloved to undergo examination, himself enrolled her in the best local clinic, and even escorted to the reception Alice. Inspected her, took tests, did an ultrasound, scheduled a second appointment. The doctors needed time to wait for the results and formulate conclusions. Peter had little doubt. They would be happy with the pregnancy. It is nausea Alice and increasing dizziness weakness. He had already tried on the role of father. For the follow-up appointment, he accompanied his wife again. He wanted to be by her side when the doctors announced the good news. But the doctor's words shocked the couple. They could not make an accurate diagnosis. It was clear that it was a rare blood disorder. It was terrifying. On Peter's body ran a crowd of goosebumps. Feet, palms, instantly went cold. He looked at his fragile spouse and did not know how to help her. If Alice was threatened by external danger, Peter would have rolled mountains of his life, would not have spared in order to protect his beloved. Here, there's trouble like this on the inside, and there's nothing you can do about it. Alice held up well, calmly asked the doctor questions about further actions, was interested in the prospects. But the man in the white coat could not say much about her illness. The diagnosis had not been made precisely. Therefore, it was impossible to determine the scheme of treatment. The struggle began. Alice now went to the hospital as if it were work. By the way, the workers had to be forgotten for a while. It seemed for a while at the time. It was Peter's decision. He was earning money for treatment and living, and Alice needed more rest. That's what the doctor said. "Why don't you quit the health club?" The man gently suggested to Alice. "Just for a while, until you're cured. Then we'll make up for it." Peter was ready for his wife's objections to a heated argument with her. He knew how much Alice loved her work. She had confessed more than once that she couldn't live without sports. "But you're right. It's better this way. I've been getting a little tired lately." Alice agreed easily, too easily. It was as frightening as her strange, unspecified diagnosis. This submissiveness, this lack of strength and energy. And so the struggle began. Peter's parents pulled in all their connections. Alice was seen by the country's top doctors. She lay in the most modern clinics, received the best treatment. The girl was even consulted by foreign medical luminaries. Next to Alice were faithful people. Her mother, Helen, and her childhood friend, Emily. Emily often came to see Alice. Her job allowed her to show up at any time. Peter enjoyed her visits because they were the only ones who could get Alice to go shopping or to the movies. The red-haired friend had a marvelous effect on the patient. She acts with me as if nothing was going on. Trying to explain to Alice's husband, and I'm even starting to feel better. I'm starting to feel like nothing has changed either. From time to time, Alice was in hospitals and clinics. No one was ever able to diagnose her. It was some strange and unstudied type of blood cancer. Standard treatment didn't work, so the doctors experimented. What else was there to do? The interesting thing is that the treatment worked and the hospitalized Forrest got better. Indicators stabilized to the girl, gradually returned strength. She was discharged under home observation. Treatment continued, but sooner or later the disease always returned. The tests were worsening again, as was Alice's condition. The doctors had no idea. They had no idea. What's wrong? Tried new regimens, shyly rejoiced at the improvement that followed. Then everything went back to normal. As time went on, the Forrest got worse and worse. Peter watched with pain in his heart as his beloved grew weaker, lost weight, turned into a shadow. His whole life now consisted of worrying about his spouse and searching for doctors willing to take on this difficult case. Peter wished he could spend more time with Alice. She needed round-the-clock support. She needed someone to be there for her. But he had to work a lot. Quitting his job wasn't an option. The tests, the medications are expensive. You gotta pay the hospital bills somehow. It was a good thing they had both Emily, and Emily, not Helen, became Alice's primary caregiver in a difficult situation. Helen, she herself was in a terrible state of mind about everything that was happening to her daughter. The old woman's heart failed, and she had to go to the hospital a lot. The stress had exacerbated her chronic illness. Emily, on the other hand, was always on the job. Probably, and it was not easy to watch the slow fading of her best friend. But the girl found the strength to smile, and even to make Alice smile. Peter couldn't find the words to convey to Emily how grateful he was to her. The man wanted to hire a caregiver first, but Emily stopped him. Just imagine how Alyosha will feel with a stranger. And in general, caregivers are hired only for old women or heavy invalids. I don't want my friend to feel like that. Peter couldn't help but agree with her. When he offered Emily money, but she firmly refused. What are you? Are you out of your mind? What's the big deal? You're taking care of a sick person. A sick person spending time on Alice should be paid for. She's my friend. Emily gave Peter a reproachful look. We grew up together. We're like sisters, even closer than sisters. What money? I don't mind babysitting Alice, especially since my job allows it. Peter didn't insist. He knew that Igor didn't earn much and must be in need of funds. But she would definitely not take money for her friend's help. The man shared in the power of friendship, rejoiced for his wife. Not everyone has such a friend. And they also say that there is no such thing as female friendship. That last evening, Emily and Peter were having tea in the kitchen. The man was late for work, later than agreed. But Emily did not express her displeasure with a look, let alone a word. They often had dinner together like this, talking about Alice and more, with their son by their side. And it seemed to Peter that everything would be all right. She infected him with her optimism and faith in a favorable outcome. Emily often uttered the phrase when Alice would be well. She said it as if she never doubted for a moment that she would. But that night, even Emily looked a little too sad and confused. Alice was sick all day today. I even called an ambulance. The doctors offered to hospitalize her. I refused. Peter was right to approve. He already knew that the local hospitals wouldn't be able to help Alice. So why put her in a state hospital with strangers? I could barely get her to take her medication. She was so weak. Nothing. Peter clenched his fists tightly under the table. In 3 days, she'll be transported by special car to New York. She's ready to be admitted there. New York. Thinking about it again. Is it worth the stress? It's better for Alice to take it easy now. She needs to rest. You said the professor said so yourself. I can't just sit around. Peter shook his head. He didn't know what was best. No one did. But he had a lot of hope for the doctor who had taken an interest in Alice's case and was already working out an individual treatment scheme for the difficult patient. The other doctors refused to give up on Alice. They just shook their hands. They signed their own impotence. Well, here you have to hope only for a miracle, shook his head, the distinguished professor to whom Peter had recently turned. They can be miracles, of course, for his practice has seen a lot of such things that will not believe. But Peter refused to live in hopes and dreams. He has always been a man of action and therefore continued to fight, looking for doctors willing to take on a difficult case. But the decision in any case, you and Alice smiled Emily goodbye. Maybe she really will be helped in New York? Who knows? I'll support you and I can do the best I can. Thank you, Peter said with feeling. You do so much for us. Well, how could I not? I'll be at your place by 9 tomorrow. I hope Alice will be better in the morning. But Emily's hopes were not realized. Peter sat by his wife's bedside for a long time that night, holding her thin hand, stroking her hair. She was already asleep. Alice had been in a deep sleep for 24 hours lately. It was for the best. Perhaps it would be easier to bear the hardships of an unknown illness. Even in her condition, Alice was a beauty. Pale and haggard, but still beautiful. Get well, whispered Peter in her ear, not knowing whether she could hear him or not. As soon as you're better, we'll go straight to Greece, to your favorite hotel. You'll wear a white bathing suit. She is a daughter. We'll feel good there, calm. That night, Peter fell asleep too quickly. Heavy thoughts didn't bother him. Maybe he was just very tired. In the morning, the man, as always, first went to check on his wife. There was an uneasiness. Alice usually woke up in the night, thirsty or in pain. Then the man would give her an injection. But this was silent. Alice lay exactly as Peter had placed her. The blanket hadn't even been pulled down. Her heart sank in an anxious premonition. The man realized everything even before he touched his spouse and felt the icy cold. The worst thing happened. It was like a dream. The first thing Peter did for some reason was dial Emily. She came rushing over. She took one look at Alice and cried loudly. Peter sat in the kitchen and watched cigarette after cigarette. His brain refused to accept the terrible truth. Emily, seeing the state of the man, quickly pulled herself together, made the necessary calls, and made a flurry of activity. It was she, Emily, who organized the funeral. Neither Peter nor Helen were capable of doing so in a state of shock and stupor. And now Peter is sitting here next to the restaurant, where Alice's wake has just taken place. It's been a difficult day. The funeral service at the church cemetery, the memorial dinner. The man has been holding back tears and tearing up the whole time. Sobs. Somehow, he didn't want to show his feelings in front of all these people who were looking at him with curiosity and interest. Alice looked like she was just sleeping. Peter looked at her so quiet and solemn restroom with fresh flowers. But remembering his wife was not what he wanted to remember. With an effort of will, the man conjured up images of a living Alice in his mind, of her laughing, of her teasing him, of her leading a fitness club class. Anything but that unnaturally calm face. The man decided he wasn't going home today. No. Everything there reminds him of the tragedy. Better to go to a hotel and get a room for a couple of nights. And then, when Peter comes to his senses, when he returns home, he will decide how to be with his beloved's things. And in general, there's so much to do, but not now. Later. Peter finally started the engine. He drove to the hotel near the train station. There were always vacancies there. The man suddenly felt hungry. Reminded at lunch, he couldn't swallow a bite, which wasn't surprising. What was strange was the other thing. How could he want anything at all in such a situation? But his stomach was growlingly reminding him of himself in the morning. Peter parked in the central station square and headed for a kiosk with a hot dog, wondering to himself, there were a lot of people here even at such a late hour. People coming and going, seeing off and greeting, and just people who wanted to buy something in the station stores. And then Peter felt someone's gaze on him. The man turned around and met eyes as black as the night itself. It was a young gypsy woman. Very young, almost a child. Her skin seemed even darker with the bright red lipstick that covered her full lips. From under a fluffy gray kerchief, a long braid poked out. The gypsy was wearing a short sheepskin coat, a floor-length purple skirt, and massive black sneakers. Realizing that the man had noticed her, the girl hurried over to him, stretching her lips into a welcoming smile. "Help, dear, what can you do?" The child is waiting at home hungry, and the gypsy began her song. Did this young lady have a hungry child? Peter didn't even want to think about it. Anyway, the girl needs money. Asked why not help. Peter slipped his hand into his pocket and handed the gypsy a few large bills. The girl looked at the money with disbelief. "Is this all for me?" "Yes," Peter nodded. "Why?" Do you need money? I have it. What's the problem? The gypsy woman smiled charmingly and hid the money in a clear bag. Thank you, dear. Peter nodded and got ready. It was all ready to pass by, but the gypsy woman held him by the sleeve of his down jacket. Wait, don't hurry. I see you're in trouble. Serious trouble. You've lost someone. Those words made Peter stop. How does she know? Maybe she saw him at the funeral today by chance. You've lost someone you love. The girl's face suddenly took on a sympathetic expression. Your wife or your favorite friend? How did you love her and still love her? How do you know this to me? Rudely asked Peter. A gypsy hand from his shoulder. A fortune teller. Without the slightest embarrassment, answered the girl. My grandmother gave me her gift. I see you do not believe, but it does not matter. You want to be rich. You gave me so much money. I want to do something to help you. I can see there's something wrong with your story, the weather. Suddenly Peter's decided. Really, what does he have to lose? The gypsy. She's got something on him. Shall I give you a hand? No, the girl smiled. I don't need all that. I need to look into your eyes. Look into your eyes. I'll see everything there. Well, look. And the gypsy woman began to look carefully into Peter's face. The man could not take his eyes off her incredibly black eyes. It was as if they were drawing him in, conjuring up thoughts in his head. Suddenly, there was not a single thought left. He felt light at heart, pleasant, as if this hard day and all the grief that had preceded it hadn't happened. The rest of the world suddenly ceased to exist for Peter. There were only two deep black lakes in front of him. The eyes of the young gypsy woman. How long this strange state lasted. Peter then tried to understand, but couldn't. Maybe a couple of seconds, maybe a few minutes. And then suddenly, the gypsy girl looked away sharply and everything returned. The noise of the station square, the unbearable weight on my heart, the smells, the thoughts. The gypsy looked strange. She looked confused. How much pain? Pronounced at last, the girl shook her head. A lot of pain and despair. But I understood why you lost the one you loved. I saw what a close bond there was between you. Now it's torn. Does it hurt? Of course it hurts. Peter thought the gypsy looked at him with sympathy, that he still couldn't believe her words, that she had an unusual gift, but how little did she know him from? It was unlikely, of course. Only that this girl might well have seen him in the cemetery, or at the church, heard something from people, and put two and two together. You don't believe it, the girl sighed. I can see you don't believe me. Well, do you want to tell me that you promised your beloved on her last night to take her on a trip to Greece as soon as she recovered? Peter shuddered. He suddenly remembered clearly how he had sat by the bedside of Alice, who was already asleep, and whispered to her in her ear the words about the trip. He promised to take her to the sea and begged her to get well soon. No one could know that for sure. Maybe the gypsy just guessed, but I don't think so. I told you I had a gift from my grandmother. The dark-haired girl said seriously. I saw something else. Scary. Your favorite. She didn't leave on her own. Helped her how? Who's in my wife? She was sick. A very rare diagnosis. The doctors tried, but the disease came on its own. The gypsy woman said quietly, looking straight into Peter's eyes. And he immediately believed it. What? What happened to her? The truth, you won't like it, sighed the girl. But you have to know it, because you might be in danger yourself. I have to help you. You're a good man, generous, kind. I'll tell you everything. You're ready. Peter wasn't sure if he was ready, and yet he nodded his head. A close person, a very close person, your favorite person, had done this. She trusted him with her. This woman she is, and she drove your love to the grave. Intentionally. I see a lot of black envy, so black it's scary. I rarely see that in people. Peter, of course, immediately thought of Emily. She was the only one who fit that description. Alice had no one closer than her and her mother. Helen obviously couldn't hurt her daughter. Neither could Emily, but the gypsy girl's red hair continued. This young woman has red hair. Emily exhaled. Finally, Peter. The red hair is a detail that dispelled all doubts. I can't see any names, unfortunately. The gypsy woman shook her head. Redhead, young, pretty, very angry and jealous. Bad energy. She did something to make your beloved sick. She did it all the time, and she had the opportunity. She was always there for her, the one who's not here anymore. Peter looked at the young fortune teller in confusion. Now he believed every word she said. The man felt it himself. He himself had noticed something unpleasant in India, some insincerity. Only lately Peter had been chasing those thoughts away. After all, Emily had done so much for Alice. She was always there for her, helping and supporting her. The man felt guilty because of such an attitude to a selfless friend to his wife. How do I figure out what it did? How do I get proof? The gypsy shrugged her shoulders and raised her sad eyes at her interlocutor. That I do not know. I'm not your helper here. Think maybe there is some way she must be punished. Peter nodded. He realized that he wouldn't get any more information from the gypsy. The girl had told him enough already. Thank you. Peter took another large bill out of his wallet and handed it to the girl. She nodded gratefully and accepted the extra payment, which she hadn't even expected. The man turned around and walked with a determined stride toward his car. Had he changed his mind about spending the night at the hotel? No, he absolutely had to go home to look for proof. And he already had thoughts on how to do it. Wait. The voice of a young fortune teller came from behind him. Peter turned around, keeping her away from the redhead and this one, not trusting her. She is very dangerous. The man nodded briefly and continued on his way. The house was empty without Alice. Quiet, dark. Things were lying everywhere in disarray. On the eve of the funeral, Peter was in no condition to keep things in order. Peter went straight to the kitchen. There was a hidden surveillance camera installed under the ceiling. Only he and Alice knew about it. The thing was that it was in the kitchen that a safe was installed, also hidden from prying eyes camouflaged. There was money, valuables, and most importantly, important documents, contracts, agreements, everything that was of special value to the company where Peter worked. The installer of the safe recommended to equip the kitchen with a camera. That's what everyone does nowadays because, well, you never know. Of course, you probably won't need it. But there are times when these records come in very handy during a trial. Well, Peter installed the camera. He almost never thought about it. But now, after a strange conversation with the gypsy and realized the safe deposit box was right, now he needs those tapes too. By the way, the farther Peter went away from the place of meeting with the fortune teller, the less faith in the reality of what was happening at home remained. The words of the young gypsy woman seemed to the man a typical divorce. The girl simply wanted to talk his teeth in, to extract as much money as possible through the stranger. A common practice of street beggars. Perhaps the gypsy girl had even hypnotized him somehow, and everything he had heard from this girl was just a figment of the inflamed imagination of a man who had lost his beloved. Nevertheless, Peter decided to look at the surviving footage from the camera. It seems that the videos should remain in the memory of the device for 3 months is quite enough time. If Emily is really involved in something, Peter will see it. The man spent all night in front of his laptop monitor, watching footage from his own kitchen. It was hard in places, very hard. Alice glimpsed in the footage, albeit faint from the ears of the pale, but still alive. At the quick transition, especially the changes happening to the girl, the changes were striking. It was as if she were melting away. Day by day, she was turning into a drone ghost. Peter saw her and Alice having breakfast in the kitchen, talking about something, smiling at each other. That was still only 2 months ago. Soon the girl had gone completely blind, and Peter was already carrying breakfast to her bed. More carefully. All in all, the man was looking at pictures from India. Alice's friend stayed at their house all the time, so she was a frequent heroine of videos from the kitchen. Emily was working right there, sitting at the kitchen table. She typed fluently on her laptop, distracted from time to time by preparations and phone calls. Sometimes she'd disappear from the kitchen for long periods of time, probably watching TV in the living room and chatting with Alice. The camera was only in the kitchen. Peter noticed something else Emily added to the food she cooked for Alice. Some liquid from a small bottle with a red cap. The man first thought it was one of Alice's medications, but the bottle was stored in a cabinet under the sink. That's an odd place for a medicine. It was as if Emily had purposely hidden it from view. The thing is that under the sink was a niche, an empty space between the furniture and the wall, a kind of hiding place. Apparently, that's where the strange bottle was. Emily added this liquid to everything Alice gave her: porridge, soups, drinks, even fruit. With amazement and horror, Peter watched Emily inject the obscure drug with a syringe directly into Alice. It seemed more than strange. Peter had an idea of what medications his wife was taking, and the list of medications did not include anything liquid, only pills. And they didn't need to be taken that often, not at every meal. They were all potent prescription drugs. A terrible realization struck Peter. Could it be? Could Emily have poisoned Alice? It didn't make sense, but there were videotapes. The camera had captured everything as clearly and as thoroughly as possible. Peter got up from the table and went into the kitchen. He opened the cupboard under the sink, stuck his hand into the niche. He didn't expect to find anything there. Emily, because if she really did it, she'd surely gotten rid of the evidence long ago. She had the opportunity, but no. Peter pulled out the bottle with the red cap. It was almost empty. Only at the bottom were a few drops of an unidentifiable substance. Peter was sure that this would be enough to analyze. The man's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. The name Emily appeared on the screen. Wow, had she sensed something or something? Yes, Peter tried very hard to keep his voice steady and calm. You didn't seem to have your face all over the place. Maybe I should come over. Do you need my help? And Emily blatantly asked to come to Peter's apartment. Maybe she remembered that she hadn't hidden the bottle. It's okay, the man replied. I'm already in bed. No, don't come. I'll see you later. Okay, but if there's anything I know, I'm ready to listen to you any time of the day or night. There's that unprecedented selflessness again. What does he want now? As soon as Peter dropped the call from Emily, he immediately began to search his phone for the number of his former classmate. He was now working for the investigative committee. Peter needed counseling. Where should he go with his evidence and suspicions? Where to start the investigation? It's not every day you find out your wife's best friend is a criminal. Once he contacted the investigators, the case spun at breakneck speed. I had to pull some strings. Not without that. But the results came back fast. There was a very toxic substance in the bottle. And yes, its effects on the human body could cause the symptoms and consequences Alice had. But it's extremely difficult to detect in the bloodstream. So the doctors didn't, especially since they weren't looking for traces of poison. Who would even think of such a thing? You can't get such a drug by accident, and a non-professional couldn't have made it either. Most likely a poisoner. That would require contact with people outside the law. Well, or he was an experienced chemist himself, so there was no doubt that Alice had been poisoned. It was a hard thought to accept. After learning the cause of his wife's death, it took Peter a long time to calm down. He threw things against the wall, growled like a rabid animal, smashed everything in sight, and like the neighbors. Only the police weren't called. Peter realized he could have prevented it. He could have, if only it had occurred to him to look at the security footage earlier. If only he had sent Alice for long-term treatment in a clinic where they would have been barred from entering. After all, his beloved had always gotten better while away from home. The symptoms didn't disappear completely, but the girl's condition clearly improved, and at home everything started all over again. No wonder. There was no Emily in the hospitals either, who generously supplied poison with every portion of Alice's food. The sneaky friend may have succeeded in injecting, nodding off the drugs, the food she brought to the hospital for the patient. But these were very different doses. That's why Alice was getting better within the hospital walls. Why didn't Peter make the connection between these facts in time? Proving Emily's guilt was more difficult. Yes, the video clearly showed her putting liquid in her friend's food. But there's no telling what was in that bottle. Not caught, as they say. Presumption of innocence. Emily's fingerprints were on the glass. But Peter's fingers were there too. So he was under suspicion for a while too. Emily, of course, was called in for questioning. Afterward, she called Peter, yelling at him on the phone, shamefully trying to make him feel sorry for her. How could you think that of me? I've known Alice since she was a little girl. I've known her a lot longer than you have. She's like a sister to me. I would never hurt her. I've spent so much time taking care of her. And you? I've seen you give it to her. Saw it with my own eyes." Peter was very happy that Emily lived across town. He was ready to tear that bitch apart with his own hands for what she'd done. But he can't go to jail. There are parents, there is Helen, who is now all alone. There's work, people need him. And he's not going to get framed for Emily. The bastard will be punished by the law. Peter didn't even doubt that it would happen sooner or later. After all, the investigator discovered more and more details, so managed to find the manufacturers of poison. They confirmed that it was Emily who ordered it. And voila! They even had a record of it. These people were filming their customers to protect themselves. Having video evidence came in handy. Other evidence was found: Emily's fingerprints, traces of the substance in her purse, and in the toilet where she tried to flush the poison. She did not take into account the fact that the drug is well eaten into all surfaces. Detecting its presence even after a while is a very simple and feasible task. Molecules of the substance were even found under Emily's fingernails. And then there was the trial. The evidence base was very rich, so there was no problem with the verdict. Peter looked at Emily after the judge announced the verdict. Of course, the man was present at every session. It was important to him. Very important. 10 years in a maximum security penal colony. A long term, of course, but in Peter's opinion, insufficient. The mitigating circumstance for this red-haired monster was gender. Women don't get much, but at least this 10 years will spend behind bars. Emily looked at Peter with undisguised malice. There was despair, fear, rage in her eyes, but not remorse. A true monster. How could you? With tears in your voice? Helen exclaimed. She too was present at the sentencing. For her, the news that Emily was involved in Alice's death was a shocking revelation. The elderly woman knew Emily as a little girl, came to her house, fed her delicious pancakes, even took her daughter's friend to her work for New Year's matinees. Consider the neighbor girl a relative and took a direct part in her upbringing, especially since Emily's parents did not care much about the child. And then all of a sudden this happens. How could you do such a thing? Helen repeated, looking at Emily. We trusted you so much. You always thought I was inferior. Emily replied dismissively. We didn't. You took advantage of me. I have no regrets. Now that the verdict had been pronounced and could not be appealed, Emily was no longer hiding her feelings and thoughts. Helen suddenly trembled violently. Peter hugged her tightly by the shoulders. He felt responsible for Alice's mother now. She was all alone after all. Peter immediately decided that he would never leave her. Immediately after Emily's exposure, Peter went to Station Square again. He wanted to find that gypsy woman. Why? The man himself could not clearly answer this question. Perhaps to thank the fortune teller, who had helped him to find out the truth about Alice's death. If it hadn't been for that chance encounter, he would still be convinced that it was an insidious, poorly understood disease. Or maybe the man just wanted to be sure that the conversation with the gypsy had really happened, that the girl existed, because their conversation seemed too unreal and strange to him. But he did not find the young fortune teller at the station. There were gypsies there, but not the same ones. He had never met anyone like the girl with the amazing black eyes. The man tried to ask people about local beggars, gypsies, sellers in kiosks and stalls. In Peter's opinion, they must have known those who often appeared in the square. But Peter's interlocutors only shrugged their shoulders and spread their hands. None of them recognized his description of the gypsy. Peter was a little disappointed by the failure. On the other hand, some secrets and should remain secret. The main thing is that the girl fortune teller helped him find those responsible for Alice's death. 3 years have passed since the tragedy. A lot of things have changed. Peter has traveled a long road to mental healing. There were on this road and meditation practices and visits to psychologists and psychotherapists. The man quit his job, started his own business. First he failed, then he succeeded. Sold an old apartment in which everything resembled tragedies. Bought a cozy country house in a quiet, picturesque cottage village. Peter was slowly coming back to life. He realized that Helen needed his support, and his parents were worried about their adult son. That's why Peter worked on himself. Gradually, life began to shine again. The sadness and longing for Alice did not go away. They remained forever in Peter's heart, just like the tradition to visit the cemetery several times a year. Alice's birthday the day she left. And yet one day, Peter was surprised to realize that he could enjoy the simple things. A delicious dinner, socializing with friends, the beauty of nature. He even met a girl who was beautiful, intelligent, understanding. She was nothing like Alice in looks or character. Peter didn't want to replace his wife. It just sort of worked itself out. Peter didn't think it was possible, but he felt familiar feelings. Joy at the sight of a pleasant person, warmth developing in his chest. Betty had become his salvation. Betty knew Peter's story. She had had her own losses and tragedies in her life. Anyway, one day they realized it was time for them to live together. It was easier and more satisfying. Peter and Betty got married without any grand ceremony or pomp. Neither of them needed it. Helen was happy for Peter. She was right, she said. Life goes on. Life goes on. The woman was able to cope with the loss too. She has new hobbies, dancing for those over 50. Book club. Helen lived, socialized, tried to enjoy life. Peter helped her as much as he could. Helen and Peter often discussed what Emily had done. They both couldn't get their heads around what she had done, and they both blamed themselves for not seeing it sooner. But it's not like there wasn't some kind of preconditions. Emily was always so polite, so friendly. Helen shook her head, making eye contact, smiling. Offers to help. Her parents both drank, especially her father. They had no time for their daughter. Not exactly a marginalized family anyway. Not exactly prosperous. I took pity on Emily. I gave Alice some things. Emily often wore old and dirty skirts and blouses to school. And she was so grateful. Thank you 100 times, it's embarrassing. And she and Alice were thick as thieves all their lives. What happened? Peter shook his head and was in no hurry to share his own thoughts with Helen. He too was tormented by that question. Why? Why? Alice always treated her friends so well and warmly, helped her out with money if she needed help, rushed to her first call, comforted and supported her. When Emily did not succeed in something and sincerely rejoiced at her friend's successes. It would seem that such a kind, loyal person, next to a gift of fate and a great rarity. So why? Maybe there was something that neither Peter nor Helen knew about, some dark history. These thoughts kept Peter's eye in the dark. In the end, 3 years after the tragedy, he finally made up his mind, made the documents for a visit with Emily in prison. He was warned right away. Emily is not in the best of health. Someone gave her tuberculosis. The treatment was long and grueling. Eventually, the disease was controlled, but the damage the disease had done to her body was irreversible. They were irreversible. She didn't have long to live. That's what our doctors say, said Peter, a female correctional officer in blue camouflage. What's my point? So you won't be surprised when you see her? The girls changed in appearance. And her? She agreed to talk to me right away, Peter said. When the man applied for a date, he was prepared for Emily to refuse to see him. He was the one who had put her behind bars. The woman must have hated him all these years. Why wouldn't she? She grinned, she'll keep it. You'd think someone would visit her. No family, no friends. At least she's getting some attention. The date took place in a room that resembled an ordinary home living room. A soft sofa, 2 comfortable armchairs, a coffee table, even a flat-screen TV on the wall. Peter spent about 20 prison minutes in this room before Irina entered it. Yes, she was right. The woman had changed a lot. Probably wouldn't have recognized her on the street if Peter had met her by chance somewhere. And Emily had always had a pleasant fullness about her. Now she resembled a skeleton of tight, dry wrinkles with skin of some obscure yellow color. Her once lush, bright red hair had turned to a liquid, dull gray. Emily looked like she was getting ready for a date. Her thin, tightly compressed lips were coated with a cherry gloss on sparse lashes. Cheap mascara lingered on their skates. For the first instant, Peter even felt sorry for her. Then he remembered what she'd done. Emily had brought her friend to a slow and agonizing death, and now she was sick and looked almost as Alice had in her last months of life. Wouldn't you like to think about retribution? Emily smiled at Peter, exposing her aggrieved teeth. Slowly, she walked over to the chair and settled herself across from her visitor, their round coffee table separating them. Peter looked at Emily and did not know where to start the conversation. The right words had somehow slipped his mind. He had planned this conversation. He had prepared questions, the right phrases. But Emily's appearance threw the man off balance. "You see what you've become." The woman grinned sadly. She looked at Peter without anger, without resentment. He had assumed that Emily would immediately jump on him with accusations. But no, it was as if she were seeking his approval, looked ingratiatingly into his eyes, and seemed to be trying to win his guest's sympathy. It was strange. "I know your illness is pronounced," the man at last. "I don't have long to live, they say. Now you understand how Alice felt." The words came off Peter's lips before he could think them through. Men about sex. Now Emily could just get up, turn around, and walk away. And he wouldn't get any answers out of her. And he needs to know. He needs to know why. Why would Emily do this to a friend who trusted her? But Emily stayed. She shook her head slowly. A spark of anger flashed in her fallen eyes, and it surprisingly revitalized the haggard face, made it more emotional. Alice woman literally spat out that name. So much hatred was put into a short word, so much dislike. My whole life has been spoiled since childhood, tormented me since I was a child. Do you know why I came to you? It's not hard to guess. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. I'd even waited for you much sooner. Do you want to know why I did that? Peter nodded briefly. He struggled to keep from saying something mean. How many times had he yelled at her when he was home alone, yelling at a woman who couldn't hear him because she was far away in a prison in another city? Peter had called her the very last words, and he had felt strangely relieved. But now it was impossible to give in to his feelings. Emily must tell. She must explain herself. Perhaps she needs it too. "Tell me everything," calmly said Peter. "I want to know everything." She always put herself above me, Emily began. "We seemed to be friends, but Emily, she acted like I was second class. It was a given, and as a kid, I took it for granted. She's a successful princess and a beautiful girl, and I'm just a sidekick." Emily was born into a well-to-do, but not very well-to-do family. No, her parents worked. They weren't exactly marginalized. They both liked to drink. Evenings in their apartment gathered in large and noisy companies. Vodka flowed. Toasts were made one after another. Then it all ended either with violent quarrels with a fight or peacefully. Postponing guests, hosts, in hibernation throughout the apartment. Both options were not good. Emily had to huddle in her room on a small sofa. Often some babies, children, guests, parents were put under her. Sometimes the girl had to sleep on a wet sheet. These kids didn't wake up at night to go to the bathroom. The parents seemed to love and care for their daughter. But for some reason, it was the child they were saving money on. Emily never had a nice new dress or a briefcase. She was bought the cheapest stationery. Her parents didn't have enough money for school books at all. So Emily, no matter how hard she tried, could not do well in some subjects. Surprisingly, her mother and father always had money for drinking with friends. One day, Emily asked them a direct question. Why is it so that the parents have enough for a feast, but they can't get their daughter ready for school properly? "Our mother and my mother are working people," ringing Matt's righteous indignation voice, explained my father. "My money we earn, we feed you. We need to relax somehow, to relieve stress, otherwise we will die at such a life." Emily did not understand why the parents' stress relief should necessarily turn into stress for her and Emily. But her mother and father didn't give her adequate explanations. "Everyone grows up that way," the mother parried. "Don't make a victim of yourself. Don't be a victim. You know how strictly my father and I were punished for the slightest offense. We don't lay a finger on you. And about the money. Times are hard now. All the kids are growing up like this. No one's getting spoiled." But Emily knew that. She could see that not all kids grow up like that. You didn't have to look far for an example. Alice, Emily's neighbor's best friend, was enough. She was raised by her mother alone. Alice had never seen her father and didn't even know who he was. Mother and daughter lived poorly. But Helen had a very special relationship with Alice. On her tiny salary, she managed to please her daughter, built up the means to buy Alice beautiful clothes for school, paid for all her school trips, cooked delicious meals for her, and most importantly, always took an interest in her daughter's affairs. Asked her how her day was going. She was aware of all Alice's relationships with her classmates. Alice and Emily were friends from a very young age. They met in the backyard sandbox. 5-year-old Emily was already walking alone. The girl's mother assured the neighbors that in this way she was teaching her daughter to be independent. Emily was even proud of it at first. Her parents walk her peers, and she was left to her own devices. Then that having already become older, the girl realized the reason for everything was banal maternal laziness and indifference, I guess. Zealously looked after her mother, and not obsessively, and from afar, not interfering in her games and conversations with other children. Helen was just there to make sure that nothing happened to her daughter on the street. The girls became friends. Alice was the first to approach the red-haired Emily and declared that she looked like Pippi Longstocking from the cartoon. Emily was interested. It was the first time she had heard the name of this character, and Alice began to tell her fascinating stories about the red-haired girl, who was like a magnet attracting different incidents. It was fascinating. From then on, Emily and Alice became inseparable. Helen, it must be said, encouraged this friendship and always made Emily feel welcome. Emily was now a frequent visitor to Alice's house. She was surprised that her friend had her own room and that it was so well organized. A closet with children's books, a huge toy box, beautiful potted flowers on the windowsill, a comfortable desk, soft princess bedding. Emily herself had never had anything like it. And Alice's mother, after all, she made far less money than Emily's parents. It's just that this woman worked hard for her daughter. Alice was the light in the window of her life's top priority. But Emily's mother and father considered their daughter a useless appendage in their small family, a problem with an extra mouth, though they assured that they loved their daughter very much. Usually both were barely moving their tongues at this time due to heavy libations. Helen never yelled at her daughter, never punished her. One day, Alice dropped a glass in front of Emily. It fell to the floor, shattered into small shards, large drops of compote or the wall. Emily squeezed her head into her shoulders. She thought a scandal was about to break out. At least she wouldn't have been patted on the head at home for something like this. But Helen only smiled. "For good luck," she said. "And in the case of his daughter, put the rag away behind you. Only carefully, no one before." The woman carefully watched how Alice coped with the work, gently guided, gave advice, and then also praised the girl for her labor. Probably it was at that very moment that Emily felt envious of her friend for the first time. Wow, she lives in her room like a princess, and her mother does not scold her for anything. Why some have everything and others nothing? It was time for the girls to go to the first grade. It so happened that the friends were at the same desk, which both unspeakably pleased. Soon it turned out that the study is given to girls is not too easy. Before school, Emily and Alice dreamed aloud how they would become the best students in the class. But in reality, they were somewhere in the middle. Emily was glad that at least here Alice did not overtake her and tried hard, did her homework, listened attentively to the teacher, even studied at home additionally, all for the sake of becoming better than her friend. True, all these efforts did not bear fruit. The girls' grades were about the same and very mediocre. And then, one day at the physical education lesson to the first grader came gymnastics coach from the sports school. She watched the kids practicing carefully, tracking down promising students. In the end, Alice and several other girls from their class were chosen. The children were invited to a screening at the sports school. Emily cried when she got home and was rejected. Alice had been picked and she hadn't. She's out again. But Helen noticed that they were very upset about something. The girl started asking around and confessed to her that she would have liked to do gymnastics too, but she hadn't been chosen. Helen hugged Emily and promised that everything would be arranged. Alice's mother felt sorry for her daughter's friend, probably realizing that she was having a hard time with her parents. And indeed, Helen went to the coach, talked to her, and MSU was added to the group. As an exception, how happy was she? No, Emily was not going to become a great gymnast. The main thing is that now the girl felt herself on equal terms with Alice. Not inferior, on equal terms. And she was also selected for the group. The older the friends grew, the more obvious was the gap between them. Alice was one of the best students of her year in the sports school, and Emily in a few years was offered to look for another sport. Thanks to the tutoring Helen hired and the tutor, Alice was learning better and better, while Emily remained a weak C student. Alice had nice, albeit inexpensive, outfits. Emily, on the other hand, wore rags that her parents had gotten from their children's friends. And so it was with everything. Alice was more liked and respected in class. The boys looked up to her. She had a more interesting and fulfilling life than her best friend. That made Emily angry. Yes, she and Alice were friends, and that friendship had many perks for Emily. For example, Alice would let her cheat at home and lend her stuff for the disco. Helen constantly called Emily for lunch and fed her with delicious pies, Highs Valenki. He also wrapped some guests with him. One day, Emily realized that even this care and pity Helen humiliates her. As if the woman sees that her daughter's friend is a pathetic creature and tries to comfort her out of the goodness of her heart. Emily was angry with Alice, despite the benefits that she received from communicating with her. Alice didn't see it that way. She thought that Emily was the most loyal, reliable person. She shared her notable dreams with her, trusted her with secrets. Naive, foolish, trusting. That open and honest look of hers was infuriating too. Emily, there was a sense of purity and freshness in Alice that was no longer present in Emily herself. Surely Alice had never once in her life been tormented by the torment of other people's evil thoughts. And here she was lucky. Emily looked like a loyal friend to Alice, but secretly she was waiting for some trouble to happen to the girl, and she was very happy when it happened. So Alice lacked literally a few points for admission to the Faculty of Economics. The girl almost cried when she shared this news with her friend. Emily comforted Alice, trying to hide her joy, but at least somewhere close, nasty unlucky. You see, my mom paid so much money to tutors. She wanted me to be an economist. I feel sorry for her. Yeah, but what can you do? I can be philosophical. Emily, not everything in life works out the way you want it to. But I didn't really want to go to that department myself. I dream of something else. I just feel sorry for my mom. Emily kept a sad look and shook her head sympathetically. And the birds were singing in her soul. It's the right thing to do. Emily herself did not even think about higher education, especially about such a prestigious faculty. The girl realistically assessed her possibilities, but Alice did not succeed either. Emily rejoiced. After school, Emily entered the culinary school. The only place for her meager scores were enough. Parents rejoiced, the profession of bread, good. Emily herself already knew then that she would never work in the catering industry. Not for her such physical labor will find another way in life to settle down. Marriage, after all, will be successful. That's not a solution. Alice ended up getting a better job, which again caused pain in Emily's heart. A friend entered the Pedagogical Institute at the Department of Physical Education. The girl has always loved sports, and she was good at it. After graduating, she did not go to work at school, but got a job in a fitness club. She immediately got good money and her own clientele, who could not get enough of the young trainer. Alice told her friend how she liked her work, shared her successes, constantly went somewhere to study, became more and more in demand and highly paid. Emily was once again desperately jealous. She even cried into her pillow at night at the injustice of it. At that time, she already hated her friend. But I couldn't break up with her anyway, though it might have been a relief as well. No, Emily continued to play the devoted friend. Emily herself had also found a reasonable income. She had learned to fill out cards for money for the market belts, and there were plenty of orders. It was a job with no prospects for development, and the pay was pennies. More, of course, than Emily would have earned in the canteen. But the girl had a completely different appetite. She couldn't get enough of Alice's ever-increasing salary. Life was again pointing out to each friend. Her place, stagnation and green swamp for Emily, and interesting work and development for Alice again injustice. All of this only fueled the hatred. But Emily still hoped that she would manage to settle in life as well as her friends, maybe even much better. She had only one option, so it seemed to the girl herself a successful marriage. All she had to do was to find a rich guy, charm him, marry him, and all a happy life was assured. Alice does not consider such an option. She revolves in her work and searches for herself, but Emily goes the other way, more effective, and most importantly, faster. Except it didn't work out. Emily tried very hard, looking for acquaintances, trying to please young people from wealthy families. Often because of this, had to step on their throats, to adjust to others, even somewhere to humiliate. And the result was still not there, not counting the short-lived romances, which did not stretch to a serious relationship. Emily felt devastated and disappointed after another failure, when Alice told her about Peter. And that's when the hatred flared up with renewed vigor. Peter was exactly the kind of man Emily dreamed of, from a wealthy family, educated with a good job, great prospects, and he really loved Alice. Emily saw how he looked at her friend with admiration and tenderness. No one had ever looked at Emily like that. It was painful and hurtful. Emily made several attempts to charm and take Peter away, but quickly realized that it wouldn't work. And then another blow. Alice and Peter got married. All of Emily's dreams were somehow unbelievably coming true for her hated friend. How could she bear it? Emily did not immediately decide on a terrible deed. First, she tried for a long time to organize her life, but to no avail. Neither in her career nor in her relationships. The girl never succeeded. Against this background, Alice's life seemed as shiny as the foil on a bottle of expensive champagne. A dizzying career, a rich and handsome husband. Peter. Emily cared about him. He was exactly the kind of man she dreamed of. And it wasn't just his money and prospects. Appearance, manner of speech, smile, all of it echoed in Emily's heart. All of it kept her on her toes. Emily wanted to be in Alice's shoes. When he put his arm around her waist, looked into her eyes. Action. Emily decided when her friend shared an intimate detail with her. Alice said she and Peter were thinking about having children. And then there was this. Emily couldn't stand it. The plan wasn't spontaneous. First, they had to scour the internet in search of the most suitable way to eliminate the rival. It was necessary to do everything so that she then did not calculate. And the perfect match was found. Aya, Emily found people who could make the cure. Their work wasn't cheap, but Emily couldn't spare any money for her dream. From there, it was simple. Alice trusted her friend. They met often, had lunch together. The symptoms didn't show up right away. Emily thought she'd been duped. The medication wasn't working. But then her friends started complaining of feeling sick. Emily was still afraid to believe that everything was going according to plan. Only Alice was getting worse and worse every day. And then she went blind. There was no doubt in Emily's mind. And the governor pretended to be a faithful friend. She was always by Alice's side, supporting her and slowly poisoning her. Now Emily felt stronger and more beautiful, and Alice was fading away. There was no trace of her success left. When Alice was gone, Emily felt a great relief. There was no one else in the world that she would never be able to keep up with. No, there are, of course, other women far more successful and beautiful than Emily. There are plenty of them, but they don't touch. Emily doesn't touch the strings in her soul. But Alice doesn't. And Peter is free now. Emily had a plan. She wanted to be a support for Peter and a comfort to him. It seemed to her that he would notice her during this difficult period, notice and appreciate her, and they would be together. Without Alice, everything should work out for her now. But something went wrong. An unexpected call to the police to press charges. Emily was frightened then, very frightened. The young woman didn't want to end up behind bars. But Emily has never regretted what she did. What happened to Alice? Now you know everything. Emily finished her story. You sent your friend to the grave out of jealousy. Peter still couldn't believe that motive. Is envy such a strong feeling? That's exactly what Emily confirmed and smiled. In that smile, you could see the joy of a winner. Peter suddenly felt uncomfortable and afraid. Goosebumps ran down his back. A monster was sitting in front of him. A monster who had created such a thing out of envy. Alice had died because of being more successful than her friend. Unthinkable. You know, I should probably go, Peter said in a steady voice and got up from the couch. Wait, no one has come to see me in all these years. Let's talk a little more. I'm going to die soon. But the man left the room, closing the door behind him. And he had a lot to think about. Peter wanted rather to share what he had learned with Betty, to talk to her about this difficult story. But Helen, he would never tell her. It would be too much for her to bear. Let her keep thinking Emily's just crazy. It's easier that way.
Subscribe and click the bell. Any other woman would have been hysterical, but Lisa didn't even cry. When the door closed behind Sebastian forever, only all the days after he'd left, she'd been tormented by a strange sense of guilt. According to the law of the genre, she should be feeling something else entirely. For example, self-pity and hatred for her husband. But no, Lisa's soul was completely calm, and only sometimes a shallow calm ran through the sea. That unpleasant feeling. She kept thinking about the fact that Sebastian would not have left if she had. And then there was a dead end, because the mind refused to answer the question what I had to do to make him stay. All the last few days, Lisa had been trying to answer that question for herself. She realized that her own life and the fate of her children depended on it. The young woman mentally tried to solve the intricate crossword puzzles, patiently going over in her mind every day, which was remembered by something. The small car her parents had given her for her 30th birthday moved confidently through the streets of the evening crash city. It seemed that she was now driving not a stylish hatchback of obscenely bright red color, but her own life, and everything depended on which way she turned at the nearest intersection. Her hand unconsciously reached for the control panel, and a life-affirming tune blared from the speakers. Lisa began to sing along with the singer in some wild performance. The woman did not have vocal data, but it did not prevent her from singing heartily and even making risky vocalizations. Probably, her miniatures were too loud because passing cars persistently honked. But these signs of attention only added to the excitement. Guys, I'm fine. I'm fine. From the speakers poured booming sounds, and the accident regretfully said aloud, "Good, but not good enough. I never thought I was capable of doing such a thing. But I'm ready to do it again, and I don't care about public opinion. That's the way I've had to keep it all my life. I've had to look up to the best. I don't want to be second best anymore. I'm gonna prove to him that I'm worth something." This vivid monologue, worthy of the best stage, was addressed to Sebastian. These words must have been on my heart for a long time. But after they were voiced, Lisa felt relieved. Only a sense of her own guilt, pity for the little business trips from behind hid in a far corner of her soul. "It's okay, I'll deal with you. I'm strong." Father from young nails brought up in his daughter the best qualities. He often told his daughter it's only when she's young. Their life seems endless, and by old age, people consider every day they live as happiness. So try to do good and useful deeds. She didn't understand the meaning of those words. "Daddy, why do that? To keep every day in your memory. You'll remember it later in life. This day I helped an old lady, and the next day I saved a bird. Daddy, when you cheat, is it a good deed or a bad deed?" Such questions of his daughter put David in a deadlock, but he never avoided answering. In general, Lisa thought he was very lucky to have his parents. They were the best people on the whole earth, and every day of her distant childhood was filled with their care and warmth. Funnel was the late child in the family. David and Miranda were already at a ripe old age when they decided to join their fates. Both of them had the first unsuccessful experience of family life, so they met for almost 3 years before applying to the registry office. To the appearance of a new addition to the family, the spouses were also preparing very responsibly. The future mother strictly followed all the recommendations of doctors, and the future father attended special courses, although at that time to such events men were very skeptical. At work, some men even frankly laughed at him. Our future father is well done. Maybe and give birth together with his wife will go. If I have to, I will. And there's nothing wrong with that. At that time, giving birth together was a novelty among us. So not everyone welcomed such an undertaking, and the male half of the population was outraged by this prospect. Sometimes both husbands and fathers gave such a forecast about this imported innovation that it would not take root in our country. They are all going crazy in Europe in pursuit of equality and freedom. We have other traditions, and everything is clearly distributed. Women give birth, and men bring up and earn money. Although one could argue with the last statement, no one dared to deny the inviolability of tradition. Therefore, David's bold decision remained unfulfilled, and the moment of accidental birth father did not see. However, this circumstance did not reduce the joy of the newly minted father on the last cash. And then the salary was given once every few months. The man hired artists from a house of culture and brought them in a broken-down Jiggly right to the house. The mini concert under the windows of the medical facility made a strong impression not only on the young mothers, but also on the staff. Some nurses even wept. From excess of feelings, such love is only shown in movies. What a good man. Of course, Lisa understandably does not remember the events of those days, but my mother loved to tell this touching story. And each time there were new details of her first days of life. When they brought you for the first time for feeding, I was even scared. That day 8 boys were born and only 1 girl. All the boys are so big-faced and screaming at the top of their lungs. My little girl looks like a Zamora in front of them. You didn't even scream. You promised like a kitten. Although Miranda spoke fondly of her daughter's shortcomings. In her early days, Lisa was not exactly pleased that her mother compared her to an abandoned kitten. It was only later, when she herself gave birth to her first son, Kevin, it became clear that for the mother the appearance of the child does not matter. But life is a very harsh thing, and it does not spare even small children. If for her parents the girl was a miracle, people around her did not think so. The first time she faced injustice in kindergarten. That day is forever. In memory, on the eve of the first holiday of spring, children prepared gifts for their moms. In addition to cute crafts, it was decided to please women with a small concert. Educators put together a program and engaged in the distribution of numbers. Then, for the first time in my conscious life, showed initiative. Let me learn a song or a poem. I'm good at memorizing. One of the teachers looked at the child strangely. It's not enough to memorize well. You have to have a pretty face. How about you? Lisa saw another teacher pushing her colleague hard in the side. What are you talking about in front of the child? Nothing out of the ordinary. I'm just used to telling the truth. Let her get used to it. She'll have to hear many times in the future that she looks like a mouse. So gray and unassuming. Of course, Lisa, her 3.5 years old, did not understand the whole meaning of what the educators said, but her memory was really good. When her mother came to pick her up in the kindergarten, she right in front of the teacher who condemned the appearance. The girl recounted everything from herself. The girl added, I was not even given a poem. All the other children were given to other children. And I speak well and sing loudly. And Kelly has a cough. But she's beautiful. And now she will sing the lead song. Lisa cried with resentment. The teacher was ready to fall through the floor in shame. Miranda tried to speak calmly, though her voice trembled with indignation. What kind of castings are you doing here? Who allowed you to cripple the psyche of children? I won't let it go. I'll go to the education department tomorrow. Lisa and her mother were not present at the party. The teacher, who had distinguished herself by her unworthy behavior, didn't show up in their group anymore either. One could rejoice at the triumph of justice, but they still tried to hide behind the backs of their comrades. When it came to important events, she remembered the first day of school life. By this time, the girl has already internalized the rules of human society and did not seek to demonstrate her talents. She by habit dissolved into the crowd of peers because in the general mass were not so noticeable her chicken ears and colorless eyebrows on her freckled face. The ceremonial ruler passed without a hitch, and she joined everyone in beating her hands joyfully. When a tall high school student carried on his shoulder a first grader who had a symbolic bell in the shape of a big bell in her hand. Of course, in her heart Lisa envied this girl because she really wanted to be in her place. But she realized that with her unattractive appearance, it was impossible. When the children went to their classrooms for their first lesson, an unfamiliar boy from the senior class, pointing his finger at her, yelled, "Guys, watch a walking horror movie." Miranda was very afraid for her daughter, but she said with a nonchalant look, "Mom, the boy probably wanted to call me a contestant because I have really big ears. He just mixed up the words. Don't worry, I'm used to it, and don't take offense." Lisa overheard her mother telling her father about the outrageous incident. "David, I'm so scared about the funnel and why everyone's picking on it. Looks pretty normal for a kid to me." "Miranda, don't worry. Your Soar Lisa is the best and the most beautiful, and she's a strong-willed character for a 6-year-old. That's what scares me the most. I'm afraid she won't become violent. There are many such stories when childhood complexes lead to terrible consequences in adulthood. I'm sure Lisa won't have complexes. She is a very bright girl and quickly learned the rules of the game. Appearance is a matter of time. We will see with you the miracle of transformation of an ugly duckling into a beautiful swan." Unfortunately, her father's predictions did not come true, and Kelly never became a beauty. But her unassuming appearance no longer frightened anyone. And by and large, everyone at school did not pay attention to it. The fact that the girl was excellent in all directions, she was sent from the school to the Olympiads in various subjects, and she always returned with a victory. Especially, she remembered the day of the next triumph, when she in the intellectual competition left far behind even high school students. But it was a pure victory. That day was one of the happiest in Lisa's life. The 8th grade student became the pride of the school. She was shown on TV programs and even written about in the regional newspaper. But fame is a short-term phenomenon, and she understood it perfectly well. She also realized finally that intelligence and knowledge are even more important than appearance. On the day of receipt of the certificate, no one remembered the Wright's Reno appearance teachers predicted her promising future. Classmates with undisguised envy looked in her direction. The first beauty of the class, whose certificate was a solid 3, deliberately loudly said, "Lucky some people. She herself is nothing." And it was her who got the gold certificate. Who's the unlucky one? Lisa earned her gold honestly, and you got a second-hand certificate because you're like the dragonfly in Krylov's fable. I envy you. Lisa will be welcomed with open arms at any university. How would you like to get into any mediocre college? The parents watched their daughter from the sidelines, and both cried tears of happiness. "Miranda, what a wonderful daughter we've raised." So many nice words have been said about Lisa today. I must tell you, dear wife, that I have never been as happy as I am today. David, today is also the happiest day of my life. Not even on our wedding day have I felt so good in my heart. There was one more person, or rather a girl, who was sincerely happy about Lisa's successes and sad that she would no longer meet her in the school corridor at the big recess. Such feelings on that sunny June day were felt by Cindy, for whom Kelly was even more than a friend. All people fall into 2 categories. Some are genuinely happy about their friends' successes. Others only pay lip service to such feelings, but deep down they envy and dream of revenge on the lucky ones. Lisa had her enemies too, but all the attempts of detractors to put the excellent girl off balance failed. And when she accidentally discovered a mouse in her school backpack, Contrary to the expectations of the organizers of this action, she did not run in. She put the animal in the palm of her hand and even stroked the mouse on its back. Subsequently, the mouse was released by Lisa to freedom. Some giggled behind the girl's back. The fisherman sees the fisherman and the mouse smells the mouse. In simple terms, a man will not hurt his own. Next time, one of the jokers smeared the chair where the best student sat with carpenter's glue. But this adventure didn't work either. Lisa noticed the suspicious glint from afar, and by the tense look of one of her classmates, she unmistakably deduced the author of the prank and addressed him with a request. "Robert, your chair's a little higher. I'm not comfortable in this one. Let's switch." The boy blushed, which the teacher took as a sign of shyness. If a girl asks, a real man has to give in. After that, Robert had nowhere to retreat to, and he sat glued to the table for a whole horn. Then his friends long held him off the furniture, but still his pants could not be saved. After lessons, the Cossacks were waiting for Lisa near the school. "You think you're so smart?" Lisa laughed in the face of the Cossacks' loser. "You know about the law of boomerang. That's what you got. You're laughing too hard. Sit down. Next time, we'll have a different conversation. Consider it your last days, and I've turned on the Cossack counter with your math skills. You are sure to say goodbye." The girl laughed again and headed home. She heard Robert shouted after her and clicked. "The one who laughs last always wins. Now it's my turn." In 5 minutes, Lisa had forgotten about her classmates' threats, but 2 days later she had to remember Robert's words. In order to save time, Lisa, like many kids in her neighborhood, walked through a small park. It wasn't a popular place with the townspeople, so everyone tried to get past it as quickly as possible. Lisa also quickened her step when she found herself in the park. She noticed from afar a group of teenagers near the fountain, which hadn't been working for a long time. A group of teenagers. It was too late to retreat, and Lisa didn't allow herself to show any weakness. She quickened her pace even more, hoping to get past the enemy cordon. But Cossacks blocked her way. "Well, forces, who are we going to laugh at?" The crowd of spectators cheered. "Maybe we could bathe her in the fountain. But it doesn't work. Then how shall we punish her? Guys, I've got an exclusive for our best student. You see, there are buildings with the letters P and G. And G, Robert, you're the man. People are hungry for a colorful spectacle. By the time the accident happened, I realized I should have gotten out of here. It was too late." Teenagers surrounded her, then took her under the arms and dragged her through a street toilet. She screamed at one of her abusers, even kicked him in the eye. But the forces were clearly unequal. From somewhere off to the side came Kaya's girlish scream. Then there was the sound of a heavy blow, followed by another scream. But now it was one of the vigilant hordes. Lisa didn't have time to realize anything as the battle cry sounded again, and another offender began to writhing on the ground in pain. The rest of the trio slipped away from the scene. Bavaria looked, round your eyes at the girl about 12 to 13 years old, and could not believe that 2 defeated opponents is her handiwork. The young judoka held out her hand. Cindy paired up and accepted the friendly gesture as, "This is where I from school happen to be. I always walk through the park. So, anyway, I heard you screaming from a distance and rushed over to help. Say, Cindy, where did you learn to do that?" Suddenly the girl was embarrassed. "My daddy taught me. He used to be a champion. But then he broke his arm and had to retire from big sports. He's a coach now. I've been training for 6 years. I'm already a blue belt, and soon I'll be a brown belt." Although Lisa didn't understand anything about sports ethics and martial arts, she stretched out meaningfully. "Great." The girl named Cindy was pleased with the praise. "I've been wanting to meet you for a long time, but I've been hesitant to approach you. And now I'm here. Forgive me for asking why you hesitated to approach me. You're an honor student, and you're a year older than me. Cindy, you're adorable. Does age and other little things matter when people are friends?" The enchanted girl looked at Lisa. You'll be friends with me. Of course, now I just have to repay you for saving me. You realize I don't mean money and stuff. Maybe you're having trouble in some subject." Cindy jumped for joy. "I'm failing math. I can't get my head around cosine and minus." "Oh, don't feel bad. I'll help you. We can start math class today." From that day on, Cindy became a frequent visitor to the powerhouse. The girls worked out at 2 o'clock every day, and then drank tea with delicious cones that Miranda prepared for them. But most of all was happy David. "It's very good that you have a real friend." The girl corrected her father. "Dad, you mean friend, not daughter. I said what I meant. You see, those words with the same root have slightly different meanings. You can hang out with a friend, talk to her, share your feelings, but only a friend can protect you. This girl, Cindy, is a true friend. I hope I'm not wrong about her." David made the right prediction about Cindy. The girl who grew up in an athletic family had strong-willed qualities and was always open to contact. She never paid out herself, although she also had something to be proud of. Soon about the girlfriends began to talk about a pair of goose. Yes, Gagarin, though both God has offended in terms of beauty, but the ambition above the roof. The girls did not pay any attention to the words. All the more they did not feel inferior. Thanks to good upbringing and clear understanding of life goals, both schoolgirls had already been formed as individuals. Therefore, they treated such conversations exactly as an adult perceives children's mischief. The only thing they regretted was the upcoming separation. But the girls found a good way to remove this obstacle. Lisa applied to Baumanka to specialize in software engineering and nanotechnology. These were completely new directions, and many guys dreamed of getting a profession of the future. That's why, for the first time in her life, Lisa had to fight for a place with equals, because among the applicants there were almost only medalists. There was a treacherous moment when the girl almost gave up. She called Cindy to get some advice from NATO. "You have no idea how many medalists there are per square meter. I'm even scared." Her friend answered her calmly. "It's normal to be scared. It's bad when people panic. You sound like you're on the verge of despair. I just don't understand why you're panicking. I'm scared too, when I go on the tatami and I don't know my opponent. But that's the philosophy behind any fight. Overcome fear and win. In your case, it's much easier, because you have to overcome your own fear." That's it. Lisa successfully passed the additional tests and was admitted to the faculty. The first year in any educational institution is considered the most difficult, so she spent all her time studying. But the workload, as the student of a prestigious university liked to say, did not prevent her from talking to her friend once a week. During hour-long conversations on the phone, the girls told each other about the main events, shared their plans. In one of these sessions, Cindy joyfully told Lisa, "I decided to enter Sekhanov at the Faculty of Sports Psychology. So very soon we will be able to see each other in person." "That's great. But what about big sports? You dreamed of winning championships, right?" "Girl, you're the one who told me I had to be realistic about what I could do. So I did, and I realized that playing for school is one thing, but playing for the country is another responsibility. In short, I'm not up to the highest level, and the term of sports life is too short. So I decided to devote myself to another useful business. After all, to train future champions is also an honorable business." Although in the voice of Cindy slipped sad notes, it was clear that this was the girl's final decision. Lisa decided to cheer her up. "Perhaps it's true. You have to plan your life with an eye to the future. And I'm very happy for you." Cindy got into university on her first try, although the girls' grades weren't very good. But the merits in sports played a decisive role. This period was distinguished by another surprising event that brought the girls together. Between their parents, there was something very similar to friendship. After all, common concerns and experiences unite people, like many girls her age. Lisa also secretly dreamed of a big and beautiful love. In her school years, she read popular novels, in which there was more tragedy than happiness. Then for days, the girl walked under the impression of the book she had read. True, she did not share her experiences with anyone. Even with Cindy, she did not speak on the subject. And the reason for this reticence was her appearance. Although Lisa got used to the fact that everyone considered her a dunce, and her being did not want to put up with this state of affairs. Therefore, the girl began to experiment a little bit with cosmetics, and it turned out pretty good. Cindy was very well versed in makeup, and the lessons of her friend went in favor of a moderate appearance. After entering the university, the girl forgot about the fact that her appearance does not meet the standards of beauty. In the first place, it was not up to it here. In the second place, most of the female students were similar to Lisa, and many girls wore glasses with reinforced lenses. It was this circumstance that helped to finally forget about her disadvantage. During one of the meetings with a friend, Kelly decided to touch on the taboo topic. Cindy, you probably have a lot of suitors on the course. You're so fashionable, and you dress boldly. The friend looked at Lisa strangely. Lisa, I'm surprised at your naivety. You're only a year older than me. At our age, a year doesn't matter. That's true. But I didn't mention age by accident. Haven't you realized that life is basically a struggle for a place in the sun? It's a natural selection process set in motion by nature itself. You know very well from school biology that the strongest survive in this process. Otherwise, they just get crushed. In order to get to the finish line, you can use any means. That is why mimicry is widespread in living nature at all its levels, including human society. Lisa looked at her friend for a long time with wide-open eyes and could not come to herself from surprise. Was she really the stubby girl who was good at wrestling? No. Now she saw before her an educated, self-confident girl who could philosophize freely. Cindy, I never cease to be amazed at you. Where did you get all this? You wouldn't believe it, but it's your school. I used to catch every word you said on the fly, and you've convinced me day in and day out that knowledge is the basis of everything. And of course, my future profession has a lot to live up to. Yeah, well, I'm in a good place when it comes to dates. Why did you ask me that? I don't know. No reason, I guess. I mean, at our age, you're supposed to have a boyfriend. Cindy remarked to Lisa with winning irritation. I don't recognize you. Where's your old confidence and optimism? What's age got to do with it? Lisa tried to control her excitement, but the excess of feelings and did not allow her to control herself. Cindy realized that without a good shake, she wouldn't say anything. She roused herself with a battle cry and playfully put her friend on her shoulder blades. But honestly, it's funny to watch you stay like a gymnasium girl. She laughed, and the inner stiffness disappeared. You picked up an unfortunate comparison, modern gymnasium girl, and anyone 100 points ahead will give. I just used to think that relations with the opposite sex are, to put it mildly, a closed topic for me. This is bullshit. You're the one who made the setting in your head. You just have to flip the switch and enjoy life. I knew from a series of unspoken phrases that you had something going on the personal front, and I wasn't wrong. Lisa exhaled with relief. I had hit the bullseye. Yes, I have a young man, but for lack of practical experience, I do not know how to behave with him. Like naturally, you don't have to come up with clever moves. If you really like a person, tell your secret hero. Do you like it? A sort of blissful smile appeared on the girl's face. Cindy, I don't know exactly, but I think I do. He makes me feel at ease. We can talk about anything. And honestly, I don't want to leave him. That's a very good start. And that's how love most often starts. But you shouldn't lose your head. The warnings of a friend flew by and didn't settle in the mind of a woman in love at the Mariinsky. That she was in love with Sebastian was beyond any doubt. Their first meeting resembled a plot from the novels they had read earlier. The second-year student needed to prepare an essay urgently, so she went to the university library. Sebastian was already hard at work on a similar assignment at a neighboring desk. They had crossed paths in the confusing labyrinths of the university before, but they didn't know each other intimately. This time, when Lisa appeared, Sebastian greeted her with a gesture. She answered the guy with a nod of her head with her neatly styled hair and braids and pigtails. Engrossed in their work, the young people did not notice how it became completely dark outside the windows. The reading room was empty. The librarian asked them several times to leave the room, but they asked for another minute. Realizing that her entreaties had no effect on the fanatical students, the woman turned off the lights. It was unexpected. The young people were confused and tried to find a way out in the darkness. But in an unfamiliar room, obstacles in the form of chairs, tables, and other furniture were at every turn. Sebastian laughed. And I now feel like a hero of a computer game to go to the next level, which there is a strict aunt waiting behind the door. You and I will have to hit a dozen bumps. Lisa was amused too. Their predicament is not easy. But if you and I don't make it in time, the scoreboard above the door will light up and we'll be stuck here forever. So we have to hurry before the nice lady locks the door. Give me your hand. With two of us, it'll be easier to get around all the obstacles, and we'll get an extra shot. The young man shook the girl's hand firmly and was the first to enter the path of the unknown. Immediately, the rumble of falling furniture was heard. Immediately, the light flashed, and in the doorway there was a formidable silhouette of the librarian. What on earth are you stupids doing? Sebastian nonchalantly answered the question with a question. Why did you turn off the lights? You thought we might break arms and legs in the dark. How many times do I have to warn you? What could I do if you don't understand Russian words? Lisa had no idea that a dialogue of just questions could be so interesting. In the end, the very unkind aunt promised to complain about them to the dean's office. Our university is for decent people. Such famous scientists have studied here. And you. We still have a long way to go. Who knows, maybe 10 years from now, you'll remember how you kicked out 2 Nobel laureates from your library. And believe me, you will be very ashamed of your bad deed. Sebastian gave the lady a bow, bewildered at the confusion, and they ran laughingly out into the street. Now I must see you off. Such a vivid acquaintance requires continuation. You don't mind that? Excitement filled soul and body, and Lisa in a joking tone replied, if we all started the game together, then, logically, we should move to all subsequent levels together. You know, that's a very apt comparison. But still, I really want our relationship to grow into something more than a computer game. I mean, we're not painted people. We're real people. I'm not against this development either. But there is one thing. The young man looked at the girl with surprise. Let me guess. Are you married? No. Then you're an alien. And your space transportation is coming for you right now. Also no. Then I give up. We haven't even met for sure. But now we're gonna make up for it. Besides, I know your name is Lisa. And I'm Sebastian. Lisa laughed heartily at the jokes of the guy, and from this on her face, there was a blush in her eyes, daring and sparkling. The young man openly admired her. Lisa, if you only knew how beautiful you are. I have never met such a beautiful girl before. It was the first time Lisa had ever heard such words, and she felt dizzy with happiness. After only a few weeks, Kevin and Sebastian felt a strong attachment. The young man, in his usual joking manner, explained this phenomenon as follows. Lisa, you and I are lucky to have met each other so quickly. Have you heard the beautiful legend about the novelties? Of course I have. And you're saying we're part of the same whole. Do you think otherwise? It's just that we're not scattered around the world like the others, but we're dumped in one place. I guess it was the end of the day, and they had no other option. But that could happen if we don't take the chance the angels gave us. Sebastian, you're always talking in riddles. Isn't it enough that we meet every day? The girl felt the same loving gaze of the young man again. He gently drew her to him and kissed her. I don't want to date enough. I want more than that. I want to see you every minute, to feel your breath. Lisa was silent and anxiously awaited the continuation of this love song. But Sebastian concluded his confession succinctly. Let's get married. Sebastian. And school. And what will we tell our parents? Lisa, listen to me. You and I are adults, and we have to make our own decisions. Is a passport stamp a barrier to getting a diploma? Probably not. Exactly. And tell me, why should you and I be held to a standard? Don't you want to do something without being prompted to make important decisions yourself? Sebastian: I'd like to, but how would we live normally? Trust me, there are no problems that can't be solved. My parents got married when they were students, and then I came along a year later. But that didn't stop them from getting an education and successfully moving up the career ladder. Imagine how surprised everyone will be when they find out that you and I are already a family. Perhaps it was the desire to surprise everyone that drove the young people when they decided to get married in secret without saying a word to anyone. They applied. Spring came and the whole world was born in blooming outfits. The hearts of the two lovers were also filled with spring feeling. Only on the eve of the important event, Lisa told everything to Cindy. Her friend couldn't come to her senses for about 10 minutes. Lisa, have you gone mad? And how does it manifest itself? Well, for example, tell me, what are you going to go to the registry office in jeans and a t-shirt? And instead of a photo in your head will be adorned with a baseball cap with some stupid English inscription on it. The bride's confidence faded a little, but she didn't give up. You make it sound like I have nothing to wear. I have a decent, classic suit and a good pair of shoes. By the way, I came to you hoping to find support and help. Did you? And I owe you an emergency fix for your shortcomings. Tell me, what sins do you give your parents for? Don't you get it in your formula-filled head? What's the most important event in their lives? The wedding of their only daughter. I don't know how things are in Sebastian's family, of course, but I'm sure his folks would be shocked too. Clara realized that her friend was right. And what would you do if you were me? I'll never be in your shoes, because I'm not that frivolous, but I would advise you to reschedule. No, Cindy, they say it's bad luck. At Cindy's insistence, the newlyweds to be urgently called their parents to make sure the wedding ceremony was as good as the others. They had to use a rental service, but the parents of the bride and groom never fully came to their senses. They hardly understood what was going on. Therefore, all questions had to be settled by Cindy. When the perpetrators of the commotion and put their signatures in the registry office, David, not without irony, asked, "And where do our newlyweds plan to spend their honeymoon?" Lisa and Sebastian looked at each other in confusion, but the new husband was more resourceful. "We'll pass our exams and go on a construction crew." John liked his son's idea of family life. "When I was his age, I was just as bold and brash." By the way, not a bad option for newlyweds. It's all about romance, living in tents, mosquitoes, shared meals, and a lot of very hard work. The man turned to the bride's parents. "I'm the one who's teasing their offspring about me. I got married when I was a student." Christina, Sebastian's mom, contributed to the discussion of an important issue. "John, that was a very different time. And now, look at all the ugly things going on around here. Sometimes you don't want to look." Miranda was agreeing out of a sense of female solidarity, and only David remained silent. The newlyweds sat quietly, silent. The important event was celebrated in a small restaurant where there was no one else but the wedding party. Sebastian's mother continued to express her dissatisfaction with modern life, but she was clearly bringing the conversation to something more important. Finally, she easily pushed her husband away. "John, what are you all agonizing under your breath? You're not going to let our children wander around in tents, being eaten by merciless mosquitoes." John glanced in the direction of the newlyweds. "Christina, a construction crew is great. It's a great option for extreme athletes. If they're so independent, let them deal with their problems from now on and take responsibility for their rash actions." "But John is our only son," David calmly said. "Friends, let's raise our glasses to the young ones, even though they have put Piggy in our hands. Let's forgive them that little thing." Advice and love. Cindy cheerfully shouted bittersweet. After the toasts in honor of the newlyweds, Kevin's father took the floor again. My wife and I have decided to take care of their lodgings. I've already booked a hotel room for 2 nights. Now we just need to find a cheap place to stay. They can't go to a hostel. John shook his head and repeated for the 3rd time in one evening that his son went to him. It's not for nothing they say genes don't set a finger, for I am a son. Thank you, brother-in-law. I fully support you. Frankly, I really do not want to send their construction team somewhere closer to the swamps, but by the example of matchmaker forced to show mercy, we'll organize a trip for 2 to somewhere tropical. For the first time all evening, the newlyweds have raised their voices. Yay, we're going on a real wedding trip, although not without adventure. Their married life began romantically, but the sweet period ended quickly and flowed these then later. Gray everyday life. The pitfalls of family life began to appear at once, although the parents always kept their shoulders in readiness to set them up in time. The young couple had a hard time. After all, lectures, credits, and sessions were not combined with a normal family life. And then there was pregnancy. Baranki forced to adjust plans for the near future. The future mother's well-being caused alarm, and Sebastian decisively stated we must take an academic. But the parents of the young couple were categorically against such a decision. Christina especially insisted on continuing her studies. In no case should we take a break in their studies. Then it will be even more difficult. Miranda supported Sebastian's mom. I'm going to take a well-deserved vacation in a few months. Of course, I still wanted to work, but for the sake of the children I will go as I should. I'll help them. Let them study, and I'll take care of my grandchildren. The young couple accepted such a generous gift with delight. But as time went on, more and more sacrifices were required. Kevin and Sebastian saw them as an obligatory step on the part of the older generation. Parental help made their lives so easy that after Kevin was born, they decided to have another child just 3 years later. This time there was a girl, in whom both grandmothers did not devote their souls. Miranda and Christina practically lived in the house of their children. What caused dissatisfaction with the men? John was the most resentful. Christina, how many times do you have to coddle them? Don't you think our children are sitting on our heads and feet shining? The woman tried to resist, but it was obvious that for several years she was very tired. John, I understand your outrage, but who's going to help them if not us? Sebastian is traveling alone with 2 kids and a job, so let her quit her job and take care of her family. John, think about what you're saying. What are they gonna live on? You should have thought of that before. Besides, Sebastian makes good money, and if you moderate your appetites a little, you can live on his salary. Lisa, she's very talented and has a brilliant career ahead of her. A woman has to choose between work and family. Christina resented it. All these years living with you, I didn't realize, John, that you hold such beliefs. Lisa's parents also argued about it. Only the discussions weren't as heated, but despite the frankly dependent behavior of young people, the parents made more and more sacrifices on the altar of their family happiness. Meanwhile, the relationship between the spouses had also cracked. Sometimes Lisa did not recognize her husband. She could not understand where his cheerfulness and trademark jokes. More and more often the head of the family came home irritated and, not to spoil anyone's mood, locked himself in his office. The family has long since replaced the rented accommodation on their own house in the Moscow region. The purchase of real estate helped parents, although from the outside everything looked prosperous. But intuition told Lisa that the family structure of her happiness is not strong, and it is about to collapse. And soon the woman received confirmation that her premonitions did not fail her. When Sebastian returned from another business trip, she began to sort through his things as a habit. No, she found no traces of lipstick, and from the shirts of her husband did not emanate the scent of French perfume. But a small business card with a Kathy's phone number on it flew out of his pants pocket. It was not in the woman's plan to cause a jealous scene, and there weren't many women with that name in the world. After all, between this and the unknown Kathy and her husband could be simply a business relationship, driven by the best of intentions. She put the blue card in the most prominent place, but the woman hadn't expected such a violent reaction from her husband. Sebastian shouted and waved his hands in indignation. "Didn't expect you, wife, that you rolled over to something as trivial as checking my pockets." The woman was dumbfounded by such an onslaught. "Sebastian, why are you yelling at me? That card just fell out of my pocket, and I don't recognize you lately. You haven't been the same." Scared by the parents yelling, Kevin came out of the nursery. "Mom, are you and Dad fighting?" "No, son, we're just talking. The girls said you were fighting, so I thought I'd take a look." "It's okay. Go to your room." The man calmed down a little, but he decided to set the record straight. "Lisa, I'm warning you if I see anything else." The woman's eyes darkened, and she wished she had followed Cindy's example. Now she wanted to scream at her husband, but she stifled her anger and cut off the torrent of threats and reproaches. "Don't you ever speak like that again. This is a warning." It worked on Sebastian, but from that day on, the relationship between the couple deteriorated completely. So Lisa decided not to tell Sebastian that she was pregnant again. Women did not lose hope that they're in a cozy home again shines star happiness. Not for nothing in the people say that trouble never walks alone. Tense relations in the family and unresolved issues with the third pregnancy supplemented another unpleasant event. No sooner had the New Year holidays died down than Sebastian's father called. "Son, urgently come with Mom. She is in intensive care." John did not explain over the phone what had happened, but from his tone, Sebastian realized that the situation was serious. He threw to his wife, "I'll take the car." "Sebastian, but it's dangerous. The roads are icy. It's better to take the train." The man looked at his wife as if he wanted to live her with his eyes. "Don't you realize my mom's in intensive care? She's not well at all. Please don't yell at me. I'm worried about you. I'm sick and tired of your unrelenting concern." In the morning, the accident found out that Sebastian didn't make it. His mother-in-law died of a massive stroke without regaining consciousness. The husband took this loss very hard. He completely withdrew into his grief and stopped even communicating with his children. But Lisa had to urgently solve the issue of her pregnancy. It was impossible to postpone it. When her husband returned late at night, he found Lisa in the living room. He grumbled unhappily, "What are you doing up so late?" "Sebastian, we need to talk." "Not this. Can't you see I'm falling asleep? I'm not celebrating either. I have a life, and I've got kids on my hands. You don't take an interest in their affairs, and they resent you, especially Kevin." The man sank down tiredly on the couch next to his wife. For a second, it seemed to Lisa that everything was back to normal. Sebastian drew his wife to him. "I'm sorry. I've been hurting you a lot lately. But it's the cost of our existence. My mom's death has taken a toll on me." "Sebastian, I understand. I'm not myself sometimes, but we can't do this alone. That's for sure. Our moms have been a great help, and now we have to make it on our own. It's okay, we can do it. The older kids are big." "So stop, Lisa. You said older kids. What does that mean?" "I'm pregnant, and I need to do something about it, because I'm critical." The woman didn't expect the news to send her husband into a frenzy. "It amazes me that you're a grown woman, and sometimes you act like a 5-year-old child. Don't you realize we don't need this child? Why did you wait till the last minute?" Tears, resentment, and hot streams flowed down my cheeks. Against her better judgment, Lisa began to justify herself to her husband. "Well, you're always walking around, disgruntled. I was just afraid to approach you. I was waiting for the right moment. Then disaster struck, and one thing led to another." Sebastian pointed to his wife's stomach. "That's where the real disaster is. You shouldn't have let this pregnancy happen. But let me tell you, I wasn't the only one involved. I get the feeling sometimes that you do things on purpose to spite me." "Sebastian, how can you say that? It's our child together, and it's certainly not his fault. I'm not going to argue with you about this, but my decision is clear. You need to get rid of this pregnancy. We've had enough of 2 children. The next day, Lisa was in for another blow. She went to the clinic, and after a checkup, the doctor said, "Sweetheart, you're too late. Your due date is a good 14 weeks, and you'll soon feel the stirrings. So you're gonna have to have this baby." Well, my husband doesn't want to. I can't help it. What are you so afraid of? I can see from your story that you're not poor. Does another baby really burden you? Children are our joys. They are our continuity. After her doctor's appointment, Lisa decided to visit Cindy. She lived across town with her husband and her son Ivan, who was a year younger than Kevin. When she saw Lisa, she was overjoyed. Oh, how many years, how many winters. What wind brought you here? I heard you had an accident. I'm sorry for your loss. All these obligatory Cindy phrases, I said at once. Only then did she invite her friend into the house. Tell me what you've come to tell me. I'm having another baby. Well, that's great. You're tearing up. Sebastian is totally against it. He ordered me to get rid of this pregnancy. Life changes people beyond recognition. I mean, not so long ago, you were such a nice young man, a real role model. I watched your touching relationship and dreamed of such love. Clara shared my worries with my friend, and at the same time paid on her shoulder. Thank you, Cindy. For what? For what you are. Oh, come on. You don't have to worry too much about men. They're all like that, and you can't change it. You just have to know how to turn the situation in your favor. I don't know what you're trying to say. Well, for one thing, have a seizure or something. Make him worry. Thanks for the advice, but I can't do that. Suit yourself, but stop by if you need anything. Sebastian seemed to have forgotten about his conversation with his wife. He would leave again for business trips and then return, always in a bad mood. Bavaria tried to keep her balance for the sake of the children's peace of mind. The woman diligently threw wood into the almost dead fire of family happiness. But the fire did not want to ignite. 2 months passed and the growing belly became visible even under loose clothes. Once at dinner, my husband said with apparent calmness, "You still did your own thing." Sebastian, it was too late. No one wanted to do the operation. Isn't there any other way? Herbs and pills. Lisa was horrified. You're an educated man, and you're offering me medieval methods to get rid of your own child. If anything happens to me, have you thought of Kevin? The man was embarrassed. He realized he'd said something unnecessary. I'm sorry, I really did say something mean without thinking. Things calmed down for a while. In the summer, she gave birth to another baby boy in a bar, and Sebastian was even happy about his wife's gift. It's a coincidence that father and son have the same birthday. Christopher will grow up. We'll celebrate together. By the time he grows up, you'll be a grand old man. That's the wrong answer. I'm only 33 now. That's the age of Christ, which is symbolic in itself. They sell hard liquor in the store at 18, and the fact that doing some simple math, you're 51 years old, and that's the best age for a man. For the second time in the years of marriage, Lisa observed a miraculous transformation, always nagging, whose husband that former Sebastian, with whom she was easy and cozy. With all her strength, women tried to keep this fragile happiness. After work, Sebastian spent the whole evening with little Christopher. He played with him and rejoiced at his son's successes. Kevin also took an active part in the upbringing of the youngest member of the family. But this family idyll did not last long. Soon Sebastian started coming home at night again. One day he disappeared for 2 days. Her imagination painted the most terrible pictures, and Lisa began to call her husband's friends and colleagues. But no one knew where her husband had disappeared to. She already wanted to call the police to start a search for the missing man. How did Sebastian show up on his own? He brushed off the questions of his children, who were also worried about their father, with irritation. And he lashed out at his wife. "You're making a big fuss and scaring the kids. I'm scaring the kids. You disappeared from the house without a word to me. You could have called me. Or don't you care about anyone? Lisa, you're just annoying me with your habit of making things worse. Another woman would have realized the cause of our problems a long time ago. You're in naive ignorance or pretending not to understand because it's more convenient. I'm sorry, what am I supposed to understand? Well, I'll tell you, but no offense. I'm sick of this gray existence. Look at yourself in the mirror. Haven't you ever been told you look like a gray mouse? You're not even trying to change. I'm sick of mediocrity. I want bright colors and bright feelings. She looked at Sebastian and couldn't believe it was him, her beloved husband, saying such hurtful words. Sebastian, come to your senses. What are you talking about? I've already come to my senses, and that's why I'm leaving. The man took out a travel bag and began to throw his things into it. Lisa couldn't move. She could not believe that this was happening to her. Sebastian, what about the kids? Don't worry about the kids. I'm taking care of them. And by the way, I'm being very noble because I'm leaving the house to you. Where are you going? I mean, where are you going to live? That's none of your business. I've met a woman who makes my heart beat. With a confident gait, Sebastian headed for the door, but when he remembered something, he turned around to get the rest of his things. I'll come back tomorrow. And don't try to look for me. We're breaking up for good. It's best for everyone. The door slammed. A minute later, there was a mighty roar of the engine, and the black SUV disappeared into the darkness of the winter night. Mommy, Daddy left us. The daughter looked at her mother, fear in her eyes. How are we going to live without Daddy now? Kevin took his sister's hand. We'll be fine. There are still real men in the house. Mom, if he comes, I won't let him in. Lisa, still hoping for the best, tried to soften the drama of the situation. Son, you can't talk about Dad like that. He's not a father. He's a traitor. It was only a few days later that Lisa fully realized the extent of her personal catastrophe. Everything was falling out of her hands, and the children demanded a mother's care and attention. 1.5-year-old Christopher was particularly vulnerable, so Lisa was left with nothing else to do. How do I call Cindy? She rushed over. You meet the rescue team. We'll stay with you for a couple days until things settle down. Have you called your parents? No, it's not right to bother the old folks. Then, when things calm down, we can tell them everything. Who knows, maybe your Sebastian is the right guy. Okay, I won't talk in front of the kids, but as a rule, most unfaithful husbands. Then beaten, humiliated, they go back to their nest. Sebastian's not coming back. You're almost 100% sure. So there's still a little hope for the return of the prodigal parrot. I'm sorry, I didn't think it through. Well, we'll see. Our head of household is at a training camp, so we're gonna be loud and happy. We're gonna stay with you guys. We'll save on utilities. Cindy winked at her friend, and she smiled at Cindy. I'm amazed at your ability to see the bright side of every situation, because I'm an optimist, and you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you're a mess. From that day on, Cindy took full responsibility for her friend's house and its tenants. She advised Lisa to take a vacation to get used to her new surroundings. Cindy actively set about transforming her friend's life. Lisa, you need to completely change all your settings. I know it's hard, but you have to try. Lisa tried to resist the over-exuberant activities of her savior Nice. Listen, Cindy, I'm about to turn 33, and I don't think it's possible. What you're suggesting. I agree that you have to do something about your appearance. You can buy fancy clothes, but how do you change yourself on the inside? If you want it bad enough, you can do anything. Motivated people who can do things that you can't believe. Of course, it's hard to do it alone, but I know someone who can help you. Lisa's alert. I didn't think you'd send me to a therapist. What's wrong with that? People sometimes don't realize the seriousness of their problems. A competent therapist can determine the depth and cause of the problem at a glance. No, I'm not going. Calm down. I have a friend of mine. We study together. He specializes in women's problems. But if you don't want to go, then I'll leave you alone. But I'd like you to do it. Trust me, you'll thank me later. And I have to think about it. So you can ride your mind-blowing car and think, and we'll cook dinner for the starving elves. Kathy enthusiastically bounced Cindy and me around, having so much fun. What are elves? They are very small people, but they can do all sorts of wonderful things. They can even turn people into bugs. Well, they can only do that to a bad person. And with Aunt Betty, the women looked at each other. Who's that? Kathy looked at her mother and her friend as if they were bugs. Like you don't know. Aunt Betty is Daddy's girlfriend. I saw her when Daddy and I went to the store to get food for Christopher. She had black hair, but I didn't like her. Cindy was interested in Kathy's story. Why does she mean? No, she's faking it, telling me how cute she is, but her eyes are evil. My mom is 1,000 times prettier. Lisa's daughter's compliment made Lisa's heart feel better. Okay, Cindy, I don't want to hear any more about doctor's aunts. I'm going to take your advice and go for a little breeze. Over 2 o'clock, Lisa circled the town. She sang songs, talked to her husband, who treated her for some Aunt Betty with black hair. And all the resentment of a silent night, she came home. The children were already asleep, and only Cindy was waiting for her in the kitchen. Well, blowing off steam. Thanks for the advice. I'm feeling remarkably light right now. I'm going to take your option. I really need to change my life completely. The trouble is, the grayness has gotten into me and won't let me change. Lisa had never been so worried. She was waiting for her turn in a soft chair, more like a big ball, with the same soft, dim light pouring down on her from above. The atmosphere was very comfortable and the tension disappeared, but the door opened. A tall man in an expensive suit, the color of wet asphalt, invited her in. Come in, please. Your friend and I are longtime buddies, and Cindy filled me in a bit on your history. Lisa nodded and felt a treacherous shiver run through her body. The man sat down across from her so that his brown eyes took in the full spectrum of the view. Don't be afraid, I'm not a real doctor. Who is? Simply put, I'm a problem specialist. I know where they hide and how to deal with them. That's all. Isn't that enough? See, you've even stopped shaking. That's a good thing, so we can communicate more easily. Lisa, I should introduce myself, Charles. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I love the company of women in general. But it's not because I'm a sucker or a slacker. It's just that there really is a mystery in every woman. Sometimes she's the cause of serious problems, and you know how to solve them. Do you always succeed? I'm not gonna lie to you. Not always, but a lot depends on trust. If a client trusts me as a specialist, a positive result is usually guaranteed. And how long will the treatment last? And how much will it cost me? Lisa, this is not a treatment in the direct sense of the term. I have been dealing with the problems of modern women for a long time, and I have my own system of solutions. No medications, all surgeries and other types of influence will not threaten you either. Then what is the point? You and I will try to find the key to your personal mystery, which is hiding inside. Although she didn't fully understand what Charles was saying, she was intrigued by his proposal. I agree, and I'll do whatever you say. That's fine. Then from tomorrow, you start keeping a diary. Buy a general school notebook in the Department of Goods and write in it all your thoughts, fears, worries. Be sure to record events in the house family and at work. In other words, write down in a notebook everything that comes to mind. And what will come out of it, we will see together later. But I'm sure it will be entertaining. Did you like to write essays in high school? Yes. I wrote for half the class. I couldn't say no, even though I knew it was wrong. And you blame yourself for that? Yes, a little bit. My husband left me with 3 kids and I can't shake the guilt. I'll definitely help you. But first, you have to get creative. Lisa bought a notebook and a whole pack of pens. She thought Charles was very strange, but she decided to try his method on herself. At home, she opened the notebook and froze. Her mind was completely blank. She took them away. So Lisa, what's next? And then it occurred to her that the first entry should be a description of this very fear, the fear of the white sheet. When Lisa looked up, She realized that it had been 2 hours, no less. Lissa looked in amazement at the notebook, in which at least 20 pages had been written down. "What a mother you gave me." She quickly turned off the light and went to bed. Memoirs are memoirs about sleep and work. In the morning, Lissa almost overslept. But she had no panic. She ran merrily around the house, pushing the children up the stairs. Cindy appeared. She watched her friend in amazement. "Var, what's the matter with you? What are you carrying yourself like a propeller?" "Oh, Cindy, good morning. Come have breakfast with us." Cindy kept watching Lissa, while Lissa was simultaneously dyeing her eyelashes and telling Kevin what to buy after school. When Lissa arrived at work, she realized that she was missing her notebook. It turns out there is so much going on around her, and she hadn't seen it before. Now the woman in her head instantly compiled her attitude to what was happening, and very much did not want to forget it all. Take, for example, their janitor. He smiled every morning, but invariably without opening his mouth. She used to think it was just a peculiarity of the man. And then it turned out that the janitor just had a constant breathalyzer. Lissa had disliked him, but someone on the staff said that transition hurt the whole family, so it's easier for him to live like that. The week flew by. Cindy looked with interest at how her friend in the evenings diligently writes something in a notebook. One day she couldn't take it anymore. "Look, you look like a schoolgirl. All that's left is your tongue." Lissa laughed. "You know, I was so fascinated by what Charles suggested that I think I might write a book." Cindy sat down across from her. "So what's the deal? Go ahead and write it." "Oh, come on. What book?" Cindy calmly poured herself some water from a glass. "I can't see why not. But Cindy, I'm not a writer." No answer accepted. No one is born one. A writer is immediately given. "Oh, come on. Who cares about the experiences of a gray mouse?" Cindy grinned. "I've never understood why you don't like yourself." "Do I? Why don't I love myself?" But her friend didn't let her finish. "But look, you know perfectly well that you have the most ordinary appearance. But you're smart and could not fail to realize that nowadays you can make anything out of such appearance. It's only worth spending a little money on a makeup stylist. Next, everyone always predicted you a stunning career, but you had Sebastian at the top of your list. I can't understand why. And now you didn't even think about what I said. You just said you couldn't do it. And why didn't you answer my question?" Lissa was, frankly, confused. She hadn't expected her friend to say that. "Cindy? Why Cindy? Who would tell you all this if not me?" Lissa stared confusedly in front of her. It seemed the shakeups in her life were just beginning. She wrote even longer today, writing about herself, about Cindy, about their meeting, about the fear that was in her as she was dragged to the street bathroom, fell asleep with notebook in hand. The next day, she had to visit Charles. She waited again in a kind of frantic excitement, and when he sat down in front of her, she immediately calmed down. "But what? How are we doing? Don't be shy. Tell me. Even if you've only written 4 pages, that's already progress." Lissa suddenly laughed. "You know, Charles, until I started writing all this down, I was sure I was living a boring, gray life. Now my confidence is shaken." A man suddenly said, "Lissa, has anyone ever told you? What a charming smile you have." "No, I don't know. I don't remember." She was embarrassed for some reason and put the notebook in front of him. He took it in his hands, looked at her in surprise. "Oh, you're good. What's up? Let's deal with what hasn't stopped gnawing at you." Lissa shook her head. "You know, I'd like you to read this without me, and then maybe we can talk about it." "Well, that's fine. You don't think you're done yet? Do you have more to write?" She nodded her head. "I never realized that there are so many different big and small events around you if you don't just list what happened in a day. And if you reflect on it, you sometimes come to the most unexpected conclusions. That's good. Tell me, has your attitude toward any of these events changed since you wrote about them?" Lissa nodded. "I saw a lot of things from the outside. You know, it even seemed to me that I could change some things, help some things. So what is it? Don't be afraid to offer your help. Don't be afraid to do things you haven't done before. You're about to change, aren't you? They talked for about an hour. Charles didn't seem to say anything, but she felt really energized. Lisa ran into the store and wanted to buy a notebook, but after some thought, she decided to get 3. If she barely had enough for a whole notebook for a week, how much more would she need? No one knows. She walked out and wanted to go to her car, but the sign for the Lily Beauty Salon caught her eye. She had always loved lilies. Lisa hesitated. She always went to the same hairdresser, the same manicurist. Then she walked resolutely to the car, put the notebooks on the seat, and closed the car. "Hello. Come in, please." A woman of her years looked at her, except she was bright and interesting, and even though her hair color was a little off, and her lips a little brighter than decorum dictated. But the woman was a real eye-catcher. After Lisa sat down in the chair, the woman asked, "What are we gonna do?" "No." You know, Lisa turned to her. "I'd like to change things. I've had enough of this." "Oh, that's very interesting." She turned Lisa to the mirror and stared at her reflection thoughtfully as she continued talking. "I studied and then worked in the capital. I studied not just to be a hairdresser, but a master of images. Then I fell in love and got married. I moved here. But apart from the details, no one here wants to do anything chemical. No, don't think I regret anything. I love my husband very much, but sometimes you just want something like this. Wedding images are the only thing that takes a little professional pressure off. That's it. I know what I have to do. My name is Adriana, by the way." 200 hours later, Adriana turned Lisa over to the mirror. "I didn't jump right in. That's enough for your first makeover. Something tells me you won't stop there." Lisa opened her eyes and almost cried out. It was her, and it wasn't her. Her hair had turned a very dark chocolate color. But when I move it, there are strands of light color peeking through here and there, a couple shades lighter. It makes it look like a really thick head of hair. Adriana had them done, and now they were shoulder length and very successfully covered the ears. The eyebrows were terminated as if they were the natural shade of your lashes, as if you had thickened them. I didn't put makeup on you. In the first place, it would be more of a shock to you. And secondly, I think you look great. Lisa finally got some air. "And this won't wash off." Adriana laughed. "Well, of course not. But I would advise you to come back at least once a month to renew the light." Lisa stepped out of the salon and saw Charles emerge from the building across the street. She smiled, waved at him, and got into her car. Lisa herself did not know why her soul sang like that. Lisa entered the house. Apparently Cindy, along with the children, had plotted to blow it past. Kevin whizzed by. Somewhere in the other room, Lena was squealing and Cindy was laughing. Then Kevin came back. "Hi, Mom." He stood there staring at her, stunned. He was called out of the room several times. He didn't answer. Then Kathy's head appeared in the doorway. "Hi, Kathy." She didn't finish. She looked at her mother as if she was seeing her for the first time. Cindy, having waited for no one, also appeared in the hallway, followed by the youngest members of the two families. Cindy exhaled noisily. Wow. Lisa was getting a little uncomfortable with the feeding. "Is anyone going to feed me?" Everyone made a lot of noise. Kevin and Cindy rushed into the kitchen, and Kathy came over to her. "Mommy, you look beautiful." "Thank you, my sunshine." Dinner was a lively affair. It was probably the very first night that no one remembered Sebastian once. As soon as Lisa entered the office, there was complete silence. "Good morning." Cindy had, of course, warned her that there would be a reaction, but Lisa had never imagined it would be this strong. Until lunchtime, her coworkers only squinted at her and occasionally asked her something work-related. And just before lunch, their famous heartthrob, Robert, approached her. "Lisa's, I was wondering if we could have lunch together." She looked up at him in surprise. Robert had never liked her, despite the fact that the entire female population, the offices, those under 30, just slept and saw themselves next to Robert. And he was really good, tall, moderately muscular, always dressed in style, and in a way that emphasized his masculinity. And he was also pompous and shallow at work. He did his job and didn't care about anything else. But that's Lisa's opinion. Thank you, Robert. I'm fine. I'm having lunch alone. She smiled charmingly at him and inwardly froze with horror. How could she do such a thing? Such a handsome man. Just for paying attention to her, and therefore giving her confidence, she must not only dine with him, but also pay for those lunches. Robert stared at her in amazement. The coworkers chuckled quietly. It was especially funny to those whom Robert had already dumped. He walked over to his desk and sat down. It was obvious that the young man was at a loss and just didn't know what to do next. Lisa had already gotten up to go to lunch when the secretary entered the office. "Lisa, you are in charge." Lisa was scared out of habit and almost sat down. But then she thought, why should she be afraid? Her work is in order. No one's private life should be anyone's business. Rick called. "Sit down, Lisa." I didn't. He asked me to come in. Lisa sat down, not understanding what the man in charge wanted from her. "Lisa, I've been keeping an eye on my employees. And you know, you've always made me happy. And when have you ever not been broken by family problems? I'm sorry, but I'm aware of that. So it hasn't affected your work in any way. I realized you were exactly the person I needed." She asked. "I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused." "Needed for what?" "My deputy took a well-deserved vacation. I can't do it alone, of course. No one wants to live on the job, and you have all the prerequisites to take this position." Lisa was a little taken aback. Just like that, to be deputy director. At least she had the education to do it. But for some reason, she hadn't even thought that she could really make a career out of it before. Now it's right in front of her. Grab it and enjoy it. She refused. "Rick, I really appreciate the offer, and I know I can do it. But in case you haven't forgotten, I have 3 children. To give you an answer so I don't let you down in the future, I need to talk to my parents. You realize if they can't take on at least a junior, I can't take you up on your offer. That's what I like about you. You're sensible and sober, and that's worth a lot. And I'm letting you go home tonight. Work out your problems. Talk to your parents. I'll see you tomorrow with an answer." Lisa caught Cindy packing. "Where are you going?" "Var, I'm sorry. My husband's coming back. I'll visit you often, but you know he won't understand my absence." "What's wrong with you? You're all disheveled." "Yeah, I came in early." Lisa told me about the boss's offer. Cindy reached out. "What can I say? Girl, I believe in you. I'm sure everything's gonna be okay now. The only thing left to do is to believe in yourself." Lisa looked up at her friend. "I do. I almost do." They hugged goodbye. "The most important thing is that you go like this. Don't give yourself time to beat yourself up and dig into yourself." Lisa laughed. "So how are you doing with your friend Charles?" Cindy gave her a sly look. "Speaking of which, why did he call me and ask me a bunch of stupid questions that were all about you?" Lisa was confused. Maybe what she wrote is the ramblings of a deranged person, and he wants to make sure so he can send her on to treatment. I ran away, my friend. In the evening, the children gathered in the kitchen. "Mom, what's the occasion?" "Yeah, Grandma and Grandpa are coming over." Kevin looked at Kathy, then at Mom. "But they don't know about Dad. They'll find out. Are you guys gonna help me or not? We're all going together." They had just had time to set the table when the doorbell rang. Miranda immediately began to reread it. "Jesus, it's only been a little while, and you were waving like that." And Daddy looked at Lisa. "Daughter, I can't even recognize you. What's the matter with you?" "A new life." He chuckled and walked into the room. "Oh, we're getting a royal welcome today." Miranda turned to Lisa with her daughter. "We forgot something. The woman was frantically going over birthdays and other dates in her head. "Mommy, come in. You haven't forgotten anything." Everyone sat down at the table. The youngest, as usual, climbed into grandfather's lap, smiled. "What about champagne?" David looked at his daughter more carefully. "I know you too well. Tell me what happened." But Miranda intervened. "Where's Sebastian? He hasn't been home lately." That's no way for a father of 3 to behave. Kathy started crying. Kevin took his mother's hand. Lisa stroked his head. "Thank you. It's okay. Mom, Dad, Sebastian left us." David quacked. Even slammed his fist down on the table like he killed a cockroach. Miranda clutched at her heart. "Mom, it's okay. We're getting used to living without him. I've gathered you for an entirely different reason." The woman looked at her daughter in amazement. "How can you say that? You have to bring your husband back into the family." David wrinkled his nose, but didn't interrupt his wife. "Mom, I'm not going to bring anyone back. It was his wish. He's happily living with some new woman. I filed for a divorce today, but I need your help. Daughter, you know that. I was offered a new position today. She said Daddy was admiring her. He said his daughter would show everyone. And gray mice are capable of something, especially since she looks different today. She doesn't look like a gray mouse at all. Her parents offered to move in with her for the cold season. The kids need to cook. And it's getting dark early. Mom, Dad, I never dreamed you'd help me so much." The next visit to Charles was on a weekend. Clara looked at the 2 scribbled notebooks with a smile. Charles was right. As soon as she wrote her problem, her fear, on a blank sheet of paper, it didn't seem so big. Charles didn't have to wait this time. He was waiting for her in his office. "Lisa, I have a suggestion. Let's talk somewhere else today." She froze. "I can see how scared you are." "What is it?" And she laughed out of the blue. "It's my surprise. It's my pleasure." They were sitting in a cafe overlooking the park. Autumn is a beautiful couple. Charles looked at her. "You've changed a lot. And not just in appearance. You know, I even regret resisting Cindy." The man smiled. "Cindy, you can't resist. You must realize that. Sooner or later we were destined to meet. Tell me, I've read your diary. Is it true she saved you like that?" "Yes, I myself still remember her screams and her enemies lying there. Of course, it's impossible to describe in words." No, you're wrong about that. You write in such vivid language. It's as if I imagined myself there. I even had an itch to break up the whole bunch of assholes. No way. I didn't even realize I'd written it, to be honest. I wasn't thinking on purpose. Lisa, I was wondering if I could show your diary to someone. He's some kind of rich philanthropist, writer, hermit. I can think of a lot of other epithets for him. I promise, if you don't want to, we'll stop anytime." "Stop that. You know, your notes would make a very good book, a guide to action for women who've lost themselves, written in artistic, very clear language. But I am a person far from all this. That's why I would like to show your writings to the pros." Lisa was expecting anything but this. "Oh, Cindy, didn't she put the idea in Charles' head? It doesn't look like much, though. It's good to change, so change everything. Let's give it a try. This is great. That's just great. Lisa, let's use the first name, and we should drink champagne for that." After the cafe, they took a long walk. Charles told how little always stood up for justice, got for it in kindergarten, at school, and at home. Lisa laughed. "Did they teach you to be fair?" "No, on the contrary. I guess I don't have a good temper. They tell me. And I'm still, I think, razor sharp. Say, Lisa, could we go to the movies or the theater with you? It's so hard to meet a woman who's interesting to talk to. I've had a lot of women come to see me. But frankly, I think of them all as patients. I can't think of you. I've never been to the movies." Clara wondered. When had she ever been to the movies? Probably when she and Sebastian didn't even have Kevin yet. "I haven't been to a movie in a long time. It's beautiful." "No, Not that you haven't been to a movie in a long time. It's that I'd love to take you. One evening, Miranda asked Lisa if Sebastian had called. Lisa turned to her in surprise. No, why would he call? Well, anyway, I met him by chance yesterday at the mall. He was with his girlfriend, but there was nowhere to hide, so he had to say hello. So it's his what? No, you know, I felt sorry for him. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that. He was confused, scared. Lisa was about to answer, but then she didn't. She knew perfectly well that her mother was worried about her. That's what a mother is. Charles had disappeared. I don't know where. After that trip to the movies, he brought her home and kissed her. She responded with such fervor that there was no way they could break up. Apparently, the man is all the same smart, weighed all the pros and cons, decided that 3 children for him too much jam, blamed him. She was sure it wasn't because she was a gray mouse. The doorbell rang. The mother looked up. Who is it so late? Lisa went to open it. But as soon as she opened the door, she was surrounded. So she was frightened. Lisa, he takes over everything and the proofreading and the publishing. He's sure it's going to be a real bestseller. Charles, put me down immediately. Charles set it down on the floor and looked at the household who were speaking of the commotion with embarrassment. David looked at Charles. I understand we need to set the table for tea. The young man will tell us who he is and why he is carrying our daughter around like that. An hour later, the father paced nervously around the room. I knew my daughter was being watched by everyone. But Lisa, we are all with you. Keep that in mind. She was confused. Actually, her profession doesn't tolerate any philosophizing. Everything has to be precisely calculated and measured. And here it was. On the eve of the presentation, she was worried. As she never worried, never thought of anything better. How to take a pen, a clean notebook, and write a diary of a single woman. Part 2. Really, it didn't work to start writing. The doorbell rang. Sebastian stood on the doorstep. How many times had she imagined this meeting, but she was still confused. Can I come out? Come in, of course. But the children aren't here yet. I wanted to talk to you. To me. But I thought we worked things out. I gave up child support. I gave up the house. What other questions? He looked at her in surprise. Have you changed? The teachers were good. Would you like some tea? Yes, if I may. He came to the kitchen. You changed the furniture in the bar. For some reason, it was nice to see his changed face. Yeah, it wasn't fancy. It's old. It's expensive. Well, I make a good living. He scrutinized his ex-wife. Something about her that made it hard for him to talk. And then he realized there was no sadness in her eyes, and she looked better than when they lived together. Lisa, I don't know how to start this conversation. I just came to ask you out. What about your Betty? Sort of. Sebastian wrinkled his nose. Betty wasn't quite what she was at first, so you decided to go back to where you were safe and happy. Don't twist Lisa's arm. No way. And yet I can't. I don't have any time. I have a presentation tomorrow. He didn't let her finish. He got excited. So am I. I mean, we'll be there. Don't you think that's a sign? Why are you going? I mean, you've never been a big fan of this kind of thing. But Betty, she loves being the center of attention. Sebastian's totally embarrassed. Sebastian, go home. The kids will be here soon. I don't want them to be upset. He obediently got up. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. She shrugged uncertainly. Lisa, in a silver slinky dress with her hair in large curls, sat in front of the mirror. Adriana was putting on the finishing touches, makeup. Every time I start doing you, I get tons of new ideas. It's a shame you can't do it all in one look. Lisa laughed. What kind of person would I make? Adriana looked at her carefully. Tell me, what's eating you? My ex-husband came by. He wants to come back, but he's going to tonight's event with his own. He knows you wrote Lisa's notes. No, you don't. Then be happy. Let him fully realize who he's lost. Lisa looked at Adriana. Are you conniving? Adriana grinned. No, fair. Cindy came in. It's all ready for you later. The crowd must be overwhelming. Lisa looked out and recoiled. And I'm not going in there. Yes, you are. I'm all thirsty for your autograph. Do you even know that the book sold out in 2 days? Cindy and Adriana literally shoved her into Charles' arms. Excuse me. They walked out into the hall to the guests, who were already enjoying appetizers and drinks to loud applause. Just a second. Clamoring. But then she throws her head back. She's a winner. And that says it all. Sebastian, why are you standing there like a statue? Let's get closer. I need an autograph. Betty tugged impatiently at his sleeve. He finally snapped out of his stupor. Oh, come on. You want to go? What? What kind of tone is that? What do you think you're doing? He turned to Betty and said, you want to go. But this is Lisa, my ex-wife. Betty was like walking into ice water. Somebody's been eating hogwash. You said yourself she works in computer technology. She does. This must have been a recreational activity. And you didn't know? No, Betty didn't know. To bickering. They didn't notice Charles approaching them. Lisa was immediately followed by her parent Cindy. And of course, Kathy's children, with her usual spontaneity, said, Daddy, didn't you believe me that Auntie was bad? See, she's hurting you too. Lisa looked at her ex-husband. They talked to her and decided she had to do it. Get rid of the guilt. The one major feeling that almost killed her. It's her fault her husband left her. Good evening, Sebastian. Turned around. Hello. Betty was silent. Lisa smiled charmingly at her. You wanted an autograph. Let me sign it. She held out her hand for the book Betty was holding. The latter handed it back to her machine, then tossed it away to be avoided. Sebastian looked at Lisa gloomily. What has become of you? Were you not so angry, so cruel? That's Sebastian. It was not at all pleasant to realize that someone who had stomped someone into the dirt had not broken down, but had risen up. He looked around. Everyone makes mistakes. I made a mistake too. I want to go back. We have 3 kids, and you know they need a father. What's that all of a sudden? You didn't need a father all this time, and now you do. You're confusing the two. You're the one who thinks you have the right to choose when you want kids and when you don't. Lisa, don't you dare talk to me like that. Charles felt the Larry's hand shake and squeezed it tighter. She has to do it herself. Why? Because he couldn't find the right words. Kevin stepped forward. I can't yell at Mom. You've already turned the kids against me. Sebastian, why are you saying all this? You've never been like this before. He stopped talking. For a while, they all stood in silence. Finally, Sebastian looked for the first time at the man his ex-wife was holding under his arm. Then his gaze shifted back to Lisa. You mean you're not coming back? You don't want our family to be reunited? Lisa smiled. No. Sebastian, no. We don't have a family. Not for a long time. She turned around, and they walked toward the stage. Sebastian caught his ex-wife's mother by the arm. Miranda, you've always been smart and calm. Why don't you talk to your daughter? We should be together. The woman looked at him. No, Sebastian, it's too late. And you know, I'm glad you're divorced. That shook Lisa up. Charles literally made her believe in herself. I'm much more comfortable with Charles as a son-in-law. They're what? She's what? Yes, Sebastian, Lisa is getting married. And I'm sure that husband will never say that she is a gray mouse who is nothing. Miranda slowly walked down the hall. Sebastian watched her silently. And just yesterday, he was sure that he would be welcomed with open arms, that he would be put in the most comfortable chair and loved even more. But it all went wrong. He turned around and rushed out of the auditorium. Now he had to make peace with Betty. He can't go live with his father. He doesn't want to talk to him anyway. After Sebastian dumped Lisa. And if he finds out what happened, he won't think he's his son at all. Sebastian breathed in the cold air. An advertisement caught his eye. They were recruiting specialists for a new testing plant in Siberia. He grinned, ripped off his license plate, shoved his hands deep in his pockets, and strode down the street.